get comfortable. Tonight, you are not opening a Pip-Boy, selecting a stim pack, and watching a red bar fill as if the body were a machine with one easy switch. You are not finding a first aid box in a ruined office and leaving with everything you need folded neatly into your pockets. You are the person who has to make that stim pack last. You are the person who notices when the clean water tastes faintly of metal. You know that a cough can begin with dust from a field, damp bedding, a broken cook fire, or water drawn from the wrong barrel. You know that a cracked hand is not a small problem when its owner must pull weeds, mend fences, carry buckets, and sort scrap every day until the skin closes again. A doctor in the Commonwealth does not spend most of the day doing dramatic things. Most of the day is counting, washing, listening, writing, boiling, asking the same questions in different ways, and trying to make one box of supplies last until the next caravan comes through. That is the work tonight. If this sounds like the kind of fallout life you would rather live than merely pass through on a quest, you can subscribe and come back for another quiet day in the Commonwealth. For now, though, the road is still dark. The clinic is locked, and there is work to do before anyone arrives. It is the year 2027, 2 centuries after the Great War, in the same season when Diamond City remains the Commonwealth's largest dependable market. The old baseball stadium is several hours away by road, beyond a line of low buildings, scrubby fields, and stretches of pavement broken open by roots. Its guards, merchants, workshops, and crowded stalls pull people toward it from every direction. Your clinic sits outside that orbit, close enough to benefit from the traffic, and far enough away that people can afford to stop. It is a small building with a patched roof, 2 front windows, and a trade shutter that opens toward the road. The place was once part of something else. You can tell from the old tile floor near the entrance, from the narrow rooms that do not quite fit your needs, and from the faded shape of lettering above the door. Whatever business occupied it before the war had expected customers to arrive in clean cars, carrying paper money and schedules. It had expected a steady electrical grid, working pipes, deliveries from factories, and a city government that could be called when something broke. You have none of those things. Still, the building has walls. Its roof mostly holds. A hand pump stands behind it, connected to a filter system that someone repaired before you came here, and that you have kept alive ever since. There is a waiting bench outside, a narrow examination room inside, a work table, a locked cabinet, shelves for jars and cloth, and a desk where your ledger sits beneath a small lamp. That is enough to make it a clinic. You live in the rear room behind a curtain and a door that sticks in wet weather. The bed is narrow. The blanket is patched. A wooden crate beside the mattress holds your spare clothes, an old paperback with several missing pages, and a tin cup you use for water. You have learned not to keep food too close to the floor. You have learned to hang your clean cloth high. You have learned that the sound of the filter tells you nearly as much as a gauge would. Before sunrise, the sound changes. At first it is only a difference in rhythm. The water filter usually gives a low, uneven burble beneath the hum of its little power unit. This morning, the burble has become thinner. There is a pause between each draw of water, then a soft rattle from somewhere inside the housing. You are awake before you fully decide to be. The room is cold in the way it often is before dawn, when yesterday's heat has gone out of the walls and the sun has not yet reached the road. You sit up, put your feet on the floorboards, and wait a moment for your eyes to adjust. The lamp is off. The only light comes through a gap in the curtain, grey and faint. Outside, the Commonwealth is quiet without ever becoming silent. A Brahmin shifts somewhere beyond the clinic yard, its harness giving a small clink. Farther off, a wind chime made from spoons touches together once, then stops. There is the soft mechanical tick of the old wall clock in the front room. You repaired it with a spring from a broken toy and have no idea whether it keeps the right time. It is useful anyway. It divides the day into manageable pieces. You dress, pull on your boots, and light the lamp with a careful turn of its valve. The flame catches low, then steadies behind the cloudy glass. Fuel is never wasted. Neither is light. You keep the lamp dim enough to see the floor and the shelves, bright enough to read the ledger when you need it. The first job is always the water. You cross the front room without opening the trade shutter. The benches are empty. The shelves are orderly from the night before, though you will check them again. A small sign hangs near the entrance in lettering you painted yourself. Clean water first. It is not an instruction that everyone follows. It is an instruction that everyone understands. At the back of the clinic, you crouch beside the filter housing. It is a collection of mismatched parts: a pre-war casing, replacement tubing from a caravan, 2 clamps made by a local tinkerer, and a cloth-wrapped connection that you do not trust, but have not yet had the materials to replace. The machine draws water from the hand pump, pushes it through layers that catch sediment and other things you would rather not name, then fills a covered storage drum inside. You place your palm against the casing. It is warm, but not hot. Good. You listen again. The rattle comes when the pressure rises. You ease open the small inspection panel, keeping the lamp beside you, but not too near the old wiring. Inside, the intake screen is furred with a fine brown grit. Not enough to stop the system, but enough to make it complain. You remove the screen and set it in a basin. The water in the basin is yesterday's wash water, saved for cleaning tools and floors. Nothing clean is poured away casually. With a small brush, you work the grit loose from the mesh. The task takes several minutes. It is not difficult. The difficulty is remembering to do it before a small problem becomes a day without safe water. That is one of the first things people misunderstand about medicine in the wasteland. They think the doctor's work begins when somebody walks through the door, hurting, feverish, exhausted, or frightened. But by then, much of the useful work has already happened or failed to happen. It happened when a water barrel was covered before the rain came. It happened when a cook boiled a pot a little longer. It happened when someone washed a cloth wrap instead of folding it away damp. It happened when a farmer rested a swollen wrist for half a day, rather than forcing it through another week of work. And it failed when those things were impossible. People do not ignore good advice because they enjoy making life harder. They ignore it because the roof needs patching before the next weather front, because the potatoes need tending, because a caravan is leaving at first light, because there are children to feed, tools to repair, guard shifts to cover, and only so many hours before darkness changes the road. Your job is not to offer instructions meant for a clean hospital with endless cabinets and a staff of strangers. Your job is to find the one useful change a person can make without losing the rest of their life. The screen is clean. You fit it back into place, tighten the panel, and work the hand pump slowly until the pressure returns. The filter answers with its old, familiar rhythm. Burble. Hum. Burble. Hum. You stand and draw a little water into a cup. It is cool. It smells plain. You take a small sip, then wait. Water is never just water in the Commonwealth. It is time, labor, fuel, spare parts, and trust. A hand pump can bring it up from the ground, but that does not mean it is ready to drink. Rain can fill a barrel, but open barrels collect more than rain. A settlement with a working purifier has more than convenience. It has a margin. People can cook without making the same choice every day. They can wash cloth. They can keep a small garden alive through a dry spell. They can trade a few sealed bottles to a traveler and receive something they cannot make themselves. A dependable filter changes the shape of a place. Nobody says that at the market. They say a settlement has good water, or bad water, or enough water for now. They say the pump is acting up. They say the south field needs another barrel. But underneath those plain sentences is a kind of wealth. Not caps in a drawer, not a fine weapon or a fresh coat of paint. The wealth of being able to drink without wondering whether the next day will be spent in bed, unable to work. You carry the cup into the front room and set it on your desk. The ledger waits where you left it, tied shut with a strip of cloth. Beside it is a short pencil, sharpened with a knife, and a stack of small paper slips cut from the blank portions of old forms. Paper is nearly as useful as cloth. Both can be reused, traded, wrapped, folded, and made to serve a purpose no one intended. You untie the ledger. The pages are filled with names only in the loosest sense. Most people are recorded by description. The Northfield family, the guard from the water tower, the scavenger with the old shoulder strain, the caravan cook with the bad sleep, the woman who keeps bees near the creek. You keep details private where you can. In a settlement this small, privacy is never complete. Everyone knows who limps. Everyone notices who has stopped coming to the market. Everyone can see a bandage or a pale face. But they do not need to know every question you asked behind the curtain. You turn to a fresh line and write the date as best you can from the clock and the calendar page pinned near the shelf. Then you make the first note of the day. Filter screen cleaned. Water running clear. It is a small entry. It may be the most important one you write. The clinic's locked cabinet stands against the far wall. You take the key from the cord around your neck. The key is dull brass, filed down at one edge and warm from resting against your shirt. It opens the cabinet with a stiff turn. Inside are the things that make people call you a doctor, rather than simply a neighbor with clean hands. There are sealed needles in a wrapped bundle. There are 2 bottles of antiseptic, one nearly full, and one with only a finger's width left at the bottom. There are glass vials, some empty, some labeled in handwriting that has faded with time. There are small packets of tablets, each counted and marked in the ledger. A thermometer rests in a padded tin. A few carefully folded cloth wraps sit in the upper compartment, protected from dust. On the lowest shelf are several stim packs, their red casings catching the lamplight. You do not touch them at first. A stim pack is one of those objects that feels simple when it is found in a drawer or bought from a vendor. It is a pre-war or auto-injector, designed to deliver a fast dose of medicine when a person needs immediate help. The Commonwealth has kept the word even when few people can explain every part inside the casing. Everyone knows it is valuable. Everyone knows it can make a bad day less bad. But it cannot build blood from nothing. It cannot replace a week of sleep. It cannot purify a barrel of water. It cannot turn a diet of preserved food and whatever grew poorly that season into the meals a tired body needs. It cannot mend a roof, shorten a work shift, or bring a caravan with fresh supplies. Used well, a stim pack gives the body help when help matters most. Used carelessly, it becomes another way to pretend that tomorrow's work will not cost anything. You keep your stock for the moments when simpler care is not enough. That decision is never easy. It is also why the cabinet stays locked. On the shelf below the cabinet, you begin counting bandages. The clean ones are folded into narrow squares. The used ones, collected in a separate bin, will be washed, boiled, dried, and inspected before they return to service. Cloth wears out. Edges fray. Stains do not always come out. A wrap that has become too thin is cut into smaller pieces for cleaning instruments or padding a splint. Nothing is wasted while it can still do a safer, smaller job. You count slowly. 1, 2, 3 bundles of broad wraps, a stack of narrow strips, a small pile of soft cloth reserved for children and older people whose skin tears easily. Then the spare pieces. The total is lower than you hoped. Not alarming, not yet, but lower. You write another note in the ledger. Trade for clean cloth. Ask next caravan. Outside, the sky has begun to change. The grey behind the window has picked up a pale blue edge. Soon the first workers will pass along the road. Some will be heading toward Diamond City with produce, repaired tools, or small bundles of salvage. Others will be walking out toward fields and fences. A scavenger may stop for water. A guard may ask whether you have anything for aching feet. Someone may bring a neighbor who has been tired for too long and needs to hear, from someone besides family, that rest is not laziness. Before the road wakes, there is lantern fuel to inspect. You lift the lamp's small reservoir and judge its weight in your hand, enough for today, if you keep it low after dusk. You have another container stored under the desk, but it is not full. Fuel is one more line in the ledger, one more reason to accept a useful trade even when the patient has no caps. There are people who assume money is the hard part of running a clinic. It is not exactly true. Caps matter. They are accepted in markets across much of the region because they are durable, familiar, and difficult to fake in large numbers. A person coming from Diamond City knows what they are. A caravan crew knows what they are. A farmer who rarely travels still knows that a few caps can become salt, lamp fuel, batteries, cloth, a tool handle, or a box of cartridges for the settlement guard. Yet a cap is only useful if someone has what you need. A patient can pay you 10 caps, and those caps may sit in your drawer until a trader arrives with alcohol for cleaning, or filter material, or a replacement glass tube. Another patient may have no caps at all, but offer 2 lengths of clean cloth, a bag of mut fruit, or an afternoon repairing the clinic's back steps. Sometimes that is worth more than a purse full of metal. The real economy is not what a thing is said to cost. It is whether it arrives before you run out. You finish checking the lamp and return it to the desk. Then you unlock the front door, though you leave the shutter closed. Cool air enters at once, carrying the dry smell of dirt and old pavement. Across the road, a small settlement is beginning its morning. A door opens. Someone calls to a Brahmin. A pot lid clatters. From far off, so faint you can almost mistake it for wind, comes a burst of music from Diamond City Radio. You do not listen closely enough to catch the song. You only hear the shape of it, bright and old, passing over the road before the sound disappears. The Commonwealth has many reminders of the world before it. Some are useful. A water filter, a sealed needle, a terminal with a screen that still glows when the right wire is touched. Some are only scraps of color on a rusted sign. Some are heavy pieces of machinery built for a supply chain that no longer exists. Medicine belongs to both kinds. The old world made hospitals, pharmacies, laboratories, delivery systems, training programs, and warehouses. It put pills in labeled bottles and instruments in sterile packages. It built machines that could test, scan, print, store, and measure. But it also built those things for people who could assume the shelves would be filled next week, because another factory would send another truck. Now, every bottle in your cabinet has a history. Someone found it. Someone carried it. Someone traded for it. Someone decided not to use it. Someone kept it dry. Someone brought it down this road. And now you decide what it is worth. The first person arrives while you are sweeping dust from the entrance. It is a farmer from the nearest fields, standing with both hands around a tin cup. Their coat is buttoned unevenly against the morning cold. You have seen them at the market often enough to know their usual pace, and today it is slower. You open? They ask. You glance at the pale sky, then at the room behind you. The water is running. The cabinet is locked. The clean wraps are counted. The lamp has fuel. Your pencil is sharp. Yes, you say. Come in. The day begins with a tired person, a clean cup, and enough supplies to try again tomorrow. The farmer sits on the edge of the examination bench and keeps both hands around the cup while you pull the curtain across the front window. There is not much privacy in a room this small. The curtain does not muffle voices, and the wall behind the cabinet has a crack that opens a little wider every winter. Still, it tells the next person on the road that this appointment belongs to someone else, in a settlement where people share wells, harvests, gossip, and repair work. That small boundary matters. You begin with the questions that usually matter most. What have they been eating? How much water have they had since yesterday? Where does that water come from? How many hours have they been sleeping? The farmer answers slowly. There has been plenty of work in the fields, not much rest, and too many meals made from whatever could be carried in one hand while walking. Corn mash in the morning. A few slices of mutfruit. Potato stew at night, when there is time to make it. Water from a barrel near the south field, filtered once when the settlement has enough charcoal, and not always when it does not. You take their wrist. You look at their eyes. You ask about fever, about dizziness, about the stiffness in their hands when they wake. Nothing points to a mystery. That is a relief. Most of your work does not begin with mysteries. It begins with people trying to live through ordinary shortages. A person can feel exhausted because they have worked too long, eaten too little, slept badly, and drawn water from a barrel that should have been cleaned days ago. None of that fits neatly inside a bottle. None of it can be fixed by handing over the rarest thing in the cabinet. You pour a little clean water into a basin and ask them to wash their hands. Then you wash your own. The soap is small and worn at the edges. You keep it in a covered dish, away from dust and flies. Beside it sits a square of clean cloth, folded twice, and a tin of boiled water that has cooled beneath its lid. These are humble things. A visitor looking for a miracle might not even notice them. But clean hands are medicine. Boiled water is medicine. A dry place to store wraps is medicine. The old world had names for some of this. Public health, preventive care, sanitation. In your clinic, it is mostly a set of habits that keep one small problem from becoming three. You examine the farmer's hands. The skin across the palms has split in several places, not deeply, but enough to sting when soil gets into it. Their knuckles are swollen from cold mornings and long hours gripping tools. You clean the cracks, apply a little salve, and wrap the worst finger with a narrow strip of cloth. Then you give instructions that can actually be followed. Keep the wrap dry if possible. Change it if it gets soaked through. Drink from the settlement pump when they can, not the Southfield barrel. Eat something with protein before going out in the morning. Ask someone else to take the heaviest hoeing for 2 days. The farmer looks toward the road, already calculating which part of that is realistic. You know the look. Rest is easy to prescribe and difficult to obtain. A field does not pause because the person tending it has sore hands. Brahmins still need feeding. Water still has to be carried. A settlement that misses 1 day of work may spend the next 3 catching up. So you add another instruction. If they cannot take 2 days, take 2 mornings. Work after the sun is up, when the cold has loosened its grip. Keep the hands covered. Bring a proper meal to the field, even if it means leaving the hoe behind for 10 minutes. It is not perfect advice. Perfect advice belongs to a place with stocked shelves, paid leave, and a reliable wagon arriving every week. Your advice has to fit inside the day people actually have. The farmer pays with a bundle of fresh mut fruit and 2 rolls of clean cloth, tightly woven and still smelling faintly of lye. You set the cloth aside at once. Fresh wraps are worth more to you than most people realize. After they leave, you open the cabinet. The morning light reaches only the first shelf. On it are the supplies you use without ceremony. Cloth wraps, glass jars, sealed needles, soap, thread, antiseptic, and a stack of paper packets folded around dried herbs. Below those are the things that require more thought. A few tablets in labeled bottles. A tube of ointment with a faded pre-war logo. Small packs of purified water. A thermometer in a padded case. A stim pack kept near the back where nobody can see it from the doorway. You do not arrange these items for appearance. You arrange them so that your hands can find them, while your mind is occupied with the person sitting across from you. Clean things stay above damp things. Glass stays away from the edge. Needles remain sealed until the moment they are needed. Anything that can spoil is marked with a pencil line and a date, as best you can judge it. The cabinet is not large, but it holds the real shape of your work. Every object is both a treatment and a future problem. Use it now, and you may not have it next week. Save it too carefully, and someone may go without help today. That is why inventory takes so much of the morning. People imagine a doctor's work as diagnosis. They imagine the close look, the steady hands, the moment when a hidden cause becomes clear. Those moments exist. But in the Commonwealth, the person who keeps a clinic open also has to be a quartermaster, a bookkeeper, a trader, a cleaner, and sometimes a repairer of hinges, lamps, and water filters. You count the bandages again. There are enough for the next few days, if the road stays quiet. Enough is not abundance. Enough means you can manage if nobody arrives needing more than you expect. You check the water supply after that. 2 sealed bottles of purified water remain for the clinic itself, and a larger covered container sits beneath the table for washing. The filter has been working since before dawn, pulling slowly from the pipe outside and passing water through layers of mesh, charcoal, and salvaged parts. It is not elegant. It does not need to be. It only needs to keep doing its job. The second visitor arrives with the sun fully above the roofs. They are a caravan worker, older than the farmer, with dust along the hems of their trousers and the flat, patient expression of someone used to long roads. Their crew has stopped nearby to trade before continuing toward Diamond City. They do not come in limping or holding a wound. They come in because their joints have been aching after weeks of lifting crates, and because the caravan master insists that anyone who has been sleeping poorly gets checked before another long stretch on the road. That insistence tells you something good about the crew. A caravan that waits until someone can no longer work has already spent more than it saved. You ask the worker to sit. Their boots remain by the door, not because you demand it, but because they understand what dust carries. They have washed at the public pump, they say. They have eaten this morning. Their water comes from the caravan's own stores, though those stores are running low. You make a note beside the date. The note is not grand. It says where they have been, how long they have been traveling, what they have eaten, what hurts, what seems unchanged from their last visit. A few lines of pencil can be more useful than a clever guess. When someone returns after a month or 3 months, you can see whether the complaint is new or simply one they have learned to endure. You examine the worker's hands, shoulders, and knees. The strain is familiar. Nothing is torn. Nothing is swollen beyond what rest and lighter work might settle. You give them a small packet of salve, show them how to bind one wrist when lifting, and tell them to trade for more clean water before leaving the area. They ask whether a stim pack would make the ache go away. The question comes quietly. It often does. You glance toward the cabinet, though the vial is out of sight. A stim pack is one of the old world's useful miracles, an auto-injector designed to deliver medicine quickly when a body needs immediate help. In the games, people carry them by the handful, press one into an arm, and move on as though recovery were a switch. Real life does not work that way. A stim pack can be valuable. It can be the right tool at the right moment, but it does not replace sleep. It does not put food back into an empty pantry. It does not clean a water barrel. It does not make a shoulder strong after months of hauling too much weight. It does not provide the follow-up that tells you whether a person is truly improving or simply pushing through the same pain with a little borrowed energy. And, perhaps most importantly, you cannot make more. The Commonwealth has scavengers, traders, tinkerers, and people who can coax one more use from a pre-war device. It does not have a reliable factory line turning out medical injectors for every small clinic along a trade road. What you possess may have sat unopened in a medicine cabinet for 2 centuries. It may have crossed half the region in a caravan crate. It may have been traded through 5 hands before reaching yours. That history is why you say, no, gently. Not today. Not for this. The caravan worker nods. They are disappointed, but not offended. People who travel understand reserves. A person does not drink the last clean bottle at noon because the road is hot. A crew does not burn all its lantern fuel on the first night. A clinic cannot spend its rarest medicine on every ache that enters through the door. They pay in caps, then add a small bundle of scrap metal from the caravan's repair box. The caps go into the locked tin beneath the desk. The metal goes into a separate crate, along with the parts you will trade later for filter mesh, lamp wicks, and perhaps a replacement latch for the cabinet. Not everything brought into a clinic belongs in a clinic. A cracked hot plate might become a useful trade item. A spool of copper wire may be worth more to the settlement tinkerer than a handful of caps. A dented cooking pot can go to the person who runs the food stall. A clean sheet of glass can be saved for a window repair. You sort all of it before midday, making small piles on the work table. Medical supplies, trade goods, repair materials, things that look useful but are too broken to keep. The distinction is the difference between a clinic that lasts and one that slowly buries itself under junk. You have seen both kinds of rooms. One has shelves with labels, containers with lids, and a place for every item. The other has good intentions stacked in corners until nobody can remember where the clean needles went. Outside, the road becomes busier. A handcart rattles toward Diamond City. Someone calls out the price of preserved meat. A pair of settlers pass with tools over their shoulders, discussing a fence post that has leaned too far toward the ditch. You sit at the desk and open the ledger. The cover is soft from use. Its pages are uneven, some cut from old notebooks, some traded from a schoolhouse, some taken from blank forms that once belonged to a business no one remembers. You write down the farmer's payment: mutfruit, cloth, advice, hand wraps. You write down the caravan worker's payment: caps, scrap metal, salve, lifting guidance. Then you add the supplies used: a little antiseptic, 1 strip of cloth, a small portion of salve, 2 cups of boiled water. The columns are not beautiful, but they are honest. They tell you what leaves the room, what comes in, and what must be found before the shelves grow bare. A clinic without records becomes generous by accident. Then it becomes empty by accident. Then the doctor has nothing left to offer except apologies. You close the ledger for a moment and listen to the filter beneath the table. Its steady sound is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply carries on, turning uncertain water into something safer, one slow measure at a time. By the time the next visitor reaches the door, you have put the fresh cloth away, returned the stim pack to the back of the cabinet, and cleared a space on the bench. There will be more questions, more hands to inspect, more small decisions that cannot be taken back once a jar is opened or a bottle is empty. For now, though, the shelves are in order, and that is half the medicine. The farmer is first. They stand just inside the doorway, with their hat held against their chest, as if the clinic were a place that required a different set of manners from the road outside. Dust has settled in the seams of their boots. Their hands are broad, roughened by soil and tool handles, and split at the knuckles despite the cloth wraps already wound around 2 fingers. They have not come in because of one sudden problem. That is usually how people describe it, even when it is not true. They say they feel tired. They say their shoulders ache before the sun is high. They say food has begun to taste flat, and that they have been waking thirsty despite drinking from the settlement pump. You point to the bench. Before asking another question, you take the kettle from the small stove. Water has been simmering there since before dawn. You pour some into the wash basin, add a little cooler filtered water, and test it with the back of your wrist. The farmer notices. Most people do. They have seen doctors in Diamond City move quickly, and they have heard stories of machines that can close a wound in moments. But your work begins with a basin, a bar of soap shaved down to a thin grey square, and enough clean water to use both without apology. You wash your own hands first. The motion is familiar. Palms together, fingers, thumbs, the spaces beneath the nails, where dirt remains after a field has been weeded or a cart wheel has been repaired. You dry your hands on a clean cloth hung beside the basin, then gesture for the farmer to do the same. They rub the soap uncertainly between their palms. More water than that, you tell them. They smile a little, embarrassed by the instruction, though there is no reason to be. Soap is not rare in the Commonwealth, exactly. It can be made. Tallow, ash, fat, thyme. But good soap is still something people save. People cut a bar in half. They keep it dry on a shelf. They wash only when they can see the dirt. The things you cannot see are harder to spend water on. When the farmer has rinsed their hands, you inspect the cracked skin around the knuckles. The cuts are shallow. The skin is dry and red from soil, plant sap, sun, and repeated washing with cold water that has not always been boiled. You ask whether the field has been using a different pump. It has. The old hand pump near the lower rows has started giving water with a metallic taste. The settlement has been using it anyway, mostly for irrigation and washing tools. But the lines between one bucket and another become less firm when people are busy. You make a note in the ledger. Then you ask about meals. The farmer eats when work allows. Corn mash in the morning. Potatoes at midday. Mutfruit when it is ripe enough to pick. Sometimes Brahmin milk, if the penkeeper has enough to trade. Preserved food when a caravan has recently passed through. They insist that this is plenty. It may be plenty on a good week. It may not be enough for a person lifting water buckets, digging rows, carrying feed, and repairing fences from first light until the evening shift takes over. You ask about sleep. They sleep near the field, in a small room added to the side of the communal storehouse. The roof leaks during heavy rain. The cot is narrow. There are always people moving past before sunrise. None of this is dramatic. That is what makes it difficult. A broken bone announces itself. A fever forces a person to stop. But tiredness can be carried for weeks. A person can work through it, drink too little, eat whatever is nearest, and keep telling everyone that it is only the season. By the time they come to you, the problem has often become a pile of ordinary things leaning against one another. You take a clean cloth, dampen it with boiled water, and wipe the dirt from the deepest cracks in the farmer's hands. Then you apply a little salve, not much. The jar is small, and there are other hands in the Commonwealth besides these. Keep the wraps dry when you can, you say. Use the upper pump for drinking. Boil water from the lower one until somebody has looked at the parts. The farmer nods. Eat before the field, you add. Not after you have already been working for 3 hours. They give you a look that says, this will be inconvenient. Of course it will. Advice is easy to give from a chair. Following it means getting up sooner, finding food before the children have eaten it, or accepting that a row of crops will remain unweeded until later in the day. So you make the instruction fit the life in front of you. Corn mash can be made the night before and covered. Mut fruit can be carried in a pocket. If milk is available, it can be mixed in. If it is not, more water goes into the pot, but it must be water from the upper pump. A neighbor can take the first half hour in the field while the farmer eats. In return, the farmer can cover that neighbor's next repair shift. That is medicine too. Not the kind that comes in a sealed package, but the kind people can actually use. The Commonwealth has no single system for clean water. There are settlements with working purifiers, large enough to fill bottles for trade and still leave water for their own kitchens. There are homes with rain barrels under patched gutters. There are hand pumps fitted over old wells, their handles polished smooth by decades of use. There are streams that look clear from the bank and are not safe until they have been filtered, boiled, or both. A dependable purifier changes more than thirst. It changes how long people can work without stopping. It changes what they can grow. It changes whether a cook can wash a knife between meals, whether cloth can be cleaned properly, whether a child with a cough is given water without someone wondering where it came from. Settlements speak of water in practical terms. How many bottles are left? Whether the filter needs changing? Whether the pump has started making that sound again? They do not always describe sanitation as wealth, but it is. A settlement with clean water has more time. Fewer people lose a day of work to stomach trouble. Fewer households must burn extra fuel boiling every cup they drink. Fewer traders turn away because they do not trust the local barrels. The value does not sit in a locked box. It moves through kitchens, fields, wash basins, and the small ordinary tasks that let people keep going. In Diamond City, water arrives through systems most residents do not need to think about every morning. Outside the wall, even a good pump is a piece of local infrastructure, watched over by whoever knows how to keep it working. A loose valve, a worn gasket, a filter clogged with sediment. Each one can become everyone's problem by the end of the week. That is why you write down the lower pump in the farmer's file. You are not the person who repairs it. You do not have the tools or the spare parts. But you know the water worker in the settlement will listen if the concern comes with a reason. You know the farmer's neighbor has a cart and makes regular trips toward the road. You know a message can reach the right hands if it is written clearly enough. The farmer leaves with fresh wraps, a small folded note for the water worker, and instructions that will likely be followed imperfectly. Perfect advice belongs to a world with full cupboards, public clinics, regular deliveries, and enough spare time to rest whenever a doctor says rest. Your advice belongs here. The next visitor waits until the farmer is outside before coming forward. They are younger, dressed for travel rather than field work. Their coat has been patched at the elbows, and their pack rests against the wall with the heavy patience of something that has been carried a long way. A small caravan mark has been stitched into one shoulder faded by weather. They say they are not sick. That is often a good beginning. They need an examination before their crew takes another run toward Diamond City. The caravan master wants everyone checked when there is time. No one wants a worker falling behind after the carts are already loaded, especially when the next stop may be a settlement with no doctor at all. You ask them to sit. Again, you wash your hands. Again, you offer the basin. This visitor does better with the soap. Caravan people learn quickly what shared water can do when several workers use the same bottles, the same pots, the same narrow space beneath a canvas shelter. They scrub with the careful economy of someone who knows exactly how much clean water is in the kettle. You look at their eyes, their hands, the set of their shoulders. You ask whether they have been sleeping, whether they have been eating from the shared pot, whether the last water source was filtered, whether they have noticed dizziness after lifting crates or a cough that comes on at night. They answer plainly. The strain in one shoulder is old. Their wrist hurts after long hours holding a Brahmin lead rope. They have been sleeping lightly because the crew has taken turns keeping watch near the carts, but they do not describe it as fear. It is simply part of the road. Everyone has a shift. Everyone knows where the lantern is kept. Everyone listens for a change in the Brahmin's restless movement. You examine the wrist. It is not badly swollen. The joint needs support, less strain where possible, and time it will probably not receive. You show them how to wrap it so the cloth supports, without cutting off circulation. You ask whether another worker can take the heaviest crates for a few days. They shrug. Ask anyway, you say. There is a difference between a request and a command, and you do not have the authority to make either one stick. The caravan master decides who carries what. The road decides when a schedule slips. The crew decides whether they will help one another when the carts are late and the light is fading. And still, a doctor's words can give a worker something useful to carry into that conversation. You write down the guidance on a scrap of paper because memory becomes unreliable after 10 miles of walking. Drink regularly, eat before loading, keep the wrist wrapped while lifting, loosen the cloth at night. Return if numbness begins or the swelling worsens. The visitor folds the paper twice and slips it into an inner pocket. Then you ask about their water. The crew has 2 barrels, they say, and a filter unit mounted on the rear cart. The unit works, though it makes the water taste faintly of old metal. They boil what they can at camp. Sometimes they trade for purified bottles. Sometimes they do not have enough fuel to boil every pot. You do not scold them. A doctor who scolds people for lacking fuel soon has no patience and no influence over the things that matter. Instead, you tell them to reserve boiled water for drinking and cooking first. Washing clothes can wait. Wiping down tools can wait. A dusty face can wait. If the crew must use unboiled water for something, use it for the task that stays outside the body. The distinction is simple. It is also the kind of distinction that keeps a caravan moving. You give them a small packet of clean cloth and a measured amount of salve for the wrist. Not enough to waste. Enough to make the next several days easier if they use it carefully. Payment comes in caps and scrap metal, both placed on the desk, with the same matter-of-fact respect. The caps will help. The scrap may become a repaired latch, a new bracket for the water filter, or part of a trade bundle when the next traveling merchant comes through. You record it all. Outside, the road is growing louder. A cart creaks past toward Diamond City. Someone calls out the price of fresh potatoes. The morning has fully arrived, and the waiting bench is no longer empty. You empty the wash basin into the drain trench behind the clinic. You rinse it with a little more boiled water. You set fresh cloth beside the soap. Then you return to the front room, where the next patient is already standing with both hands tucked into their pockets, waiting to be told that there is still time. You recognize the next patient from the nearby plots, though you do not make a point of saying so. Recognition is useful. It tells you which road they take home, whether the work has been heavy lately, whether their household has a working pump. But people come through this door because they want to be treated as more than the sum of whatever everyone else has noticed about them. They sit on the edge of the bench and explain that their hands have been stiff since the last long stretch of planting. Nothing dramatic has happened. That is often how the day begins. A thumb that catches when it closes. A shoulder that has started to ache before the first basket is full. Skin split by soil, sun and wash water that is never quite as clean as it ought to be. You ask where the stiffness starts, what motion brings it on, whether it eases after sleep. You ask whether they have been eating regularly. The answer to that one comes after a pause. Regularly enough. That phrase can mean many things. It can mean a person eats when the pot is full and gives the better portion to someone else when it is not. It can mean they have had corn mash for 3 evenings and tell themselves it counts as variety because the second night had salt. It can mean their work begins before the meal they need to do it. You wrap the hand, not tightly, but with enough support to remind the joint that it need not do every bit of labor alone. You show them a way to change how they grip the hoe handle. You recommend shorter work blocks if they can manage them, and when they laugh at that, you do not repeat yourself, as if saying it twice will make the fields smaller. Instead, you give them the version of the advice that belongs to their actual life. Trade the heavier rows with someone for 2 days. Use cloth around the handle. Stop before the hand goes numb, not after. Eat something with fat before the morning work if there is any to spare. They nod. This they can try. At the desk, they place 6 caps beside the ledger. Then they add a little bundle of clean cloth, folded carefully and tied with string. You weigh the choice without making a show of it. The caps are ordinary enough. The cloth is better than ordinary. It has been washed well, dried in the sun, and kept away from the dust of the road. It will become wraps, cleaning squares, strips for securing a splint, perhaps a bandage after it has spent time in the boiling pot. You write down the 6 caps. Then you write down the cloth. The clinic's trade window is no more than a wooden shutter that lifts outward onto the road. By the time you unhook it, the traffic has settled into its morning pattern. 2 people head toward Diamond City with handcarts. A scavenger passes with a sack of salvage balanced against one shoulder. A woman with 3 jars of preserved mut fruit pauses to ask whether you still have soap. You do, though not much. The small shelf beside the window holds the things people can buy without an appointment. Wrapped soap, clean cloth, a few packets of dried herbs whose purpose you know well enough to explain plainly. Basic salve. Water-purifying tablets, kept in a tin where moisture cannot reach them. A couple of simple braces made from cloth, leather, and thin pieces of metal. None of it looks impressive. None of it has the bright, sealed confidence of a pre-war pharmacy. But it is useful. That is the real measure here. Useful means it can be replaced, carried, understood, and used by someone whose hands are tired and whose day does not leave room for complicated instructions. The woman with the mutfruit jars asks the price of 2 bars of soap. You tell her. She considers it, then asks whether you will take food instead. You ask when the jars were sealed. Yesterday evening. You inspect the lids. The wax is sound. The glass is not chipped. The fruit has been cooked down properly, and the jars have been kept in a shaded crate rather than on a hot windowsill. You accept 1 jar and 2 caps. She gets her soap. You get something that will last on the clinic shelf, or can be traded later for lamp oil, a battery, or a roll of tubing. There are people who imagine caps solve the problem of value. They make trade quicker, certainly. A bottle cap is small, familiar, difficult to counterfeit, without wasting more effort than most people care to spend. Across much of the Commonwealth, it is accepted because enough people agree that it is accepted. A trader takes caps because another trader will take them tomorrow. But caps do not turn a poor harvest into food. They do not make a broken purifier work. They do not tell you whether a traveler has kept their medicine dry through 3 days of bad weather. In a place like this, barter remains underneath everything. A doctor may charge a few caps for a consultation, but the clinic stays open because a water worker repairs a valve when it begins to leak. A farmer sends over corn after a good week. A tinker straightens the bent catch on the medicine cabinet. Someone with a decent Brahmin team carries a crate of jars to Diamond City and brings back alcohol, filters, and whatever sealed supplies can be found. The price written in the ledger is only part of the exchange. The rest is memory. You remember who paid in full when they could. You remember who brought clean cloth without being asked. You remember who has promised to repair the waiting bench once their own roof stops shedding boards in the rain. They remember that you opened the door at an inconvenient hour. They remember that you did not demand a full payment before looking at a problem. They remember whether your advice made room for the fact that they still had to work tomorrow. That kind of accounting is not sentimental. It is practical. It is how a settlement makes a service last when nobody has a central office, a public hospital, or a warehouse filled with regular deliveries. The next person at the window does not need treatment today. They need water tablets. Their household's rain barrel has taken on a sour smell after a stretch of warm weather, and the filter cloth they use has worn thin. You sell them enough tablets for the week, then explain again that the tablets do not make a filthy container clean. Scrub the barrel first. Keep the lid covered. Do not dip hands into the stored water. Use a cup with a handle and keep that cup for water alone. They listen with the expression of someone who already knows most of this, but has needed to hear it from another person. That is another part of the work. Sometimes advice is not new information. Sometimes it is permission to take a small precaution seriously. They offer 3 caps. You take 2. The remaining cap stays in their hand, and for a second they look uncertain. Get a new cloth, you tell them. Not from the road stall. Ask the weaver near the south plots. They tuck the cap away and leave. You could have taken it. The clinic needs caps. The alcohol bottle is nearly empty. One of the lanterns has a wick that will not survive many more trims. You have been putting aside a little at a time for a replacement thermometer, because the old one has started to read differently, depending on whether it has been sitting in sunlight. Compassion has limits because shelves have limits. You know this better than most people who come through the door. Giving away everything feels generous for an afternoon. Then the clean wraps run out. The medicine cabinet empties. The next person arrives with a problem you could have helped. If only you had protected the clinic from becoming another room full of good intentions and nothing else. So you make choices constantly, usually quiet ones. You charge the caravan crew because they are traveling toward a market and can trade. You take produce from the farmer because the clinic can use it. You discount soap for the household with the bad water barrel because prevention costs less than dealing with what follows. You reserve certain supplies for people who cannot wait for the next cart from Diamond City. There is no perfect ledger for this. There is only judgment, revised each day. Near midday, a repair worker arrives carrying a small box with a loose metal hinge inside. It is the hinge from your medicine cabinet. You had mentioned it 2 days ago, half expecting the comment to disappear into the usual fog of settlement promises. The repair worker sets the box down and says they found a piece that fits. You ask what they want for the labor. 2 salve packets, they say, and a look at my knee later this week. You agree. The hinge itself is not valuable in a way that can be measured easily. It is old metal, scratched and slightly uneven, but a cabinet door that closes properly keeps dust away from the supplies inside. It keeps jars from falling when the floor shakes under a passing cart. It lets you sort what must stay dry from what can sit in the open. A little repair can preserve a great deal. You write the exchange into the ledger with the same care you give every entry. Date first. Name only if it is necessary, and often it is not. A household mark, a work roll, an agreed description of the debt. What was given? What was received? What remains? Paper has its own weaknesses. It burns. It gets wet. It attracts mildew if it sits too close to a damp wall. But paper does not need a charged battery. It can be read by lantern light. It can be copied. It can be tucked inside a tin when the weather turns. You keep a terminal in the back room, salvaged and repaired more times than you can count, but the terminal is not the clinic's memory by itself. Its screen flickers when the power runs low. Its keys stick in humid weather. The paper ledger is slower, but it remains where you put it. A clinic without records forgets what it has used, what it owes, and what it promised. It begins to order the wrong things from traders. It spends its last caps on goods that looked useful at the window, but do not solve the shortage waiting in the back room. It gives out medicine without noticing that the replacement supply is still 2 weeks away. Before long, it becomes a place where people come hoping and leave with apologies. You do not want apologies to be the main thing you have to offer. So, between patients, you count. There are 12 clean bandage rolls left, not including the cloth that still needs boiling, 1 nearly full bottle of antiseptic, and another that has been stretched with caution but cannot be stretched again. enough water tablets for perhaps 10 households, depending on the weather, 4 sealed needles, 2 small batteries suitable for the Pip-Boy reader, though one has been used before and should not be trusted for long work. You mark each number beside the day's payments. The list tells you what the next caravan must bring. It tells you which things can be sold from the window and which must stay behind the cabinet door. It tells you, without any drama, how narrow the margin is. Outside, the market road keeps moving. Caps change hands. Food changes hands. A sack of screws becomes a repaired pump. A repaired pump becomes cleaner water. Cleaner water becomes fewer people sitting in your front room, tired and embarrassed, asking why they cannot keep anything down. That is what staying well costs. Not one miracle item, not one sharp sound from an injector. It costs time spent boiling cloth. It costs a working lid on a water barrel. It costs someone remembering to eat before a long shift. It costs a trader carrying sealed alcohol over a road they know well. It costs a doctor deciding which supply can leave the shelf today and which one must remain for tomorrow. By the time the sun has risen high enough to brighten the dust outside the window, your ledger has gained 3 payments, 2 debts, 1 repair agreement, and a note to ask the next Diamond City-bound cart about replacement filters. You close the shutter halfway, leaving enough space for air and conversation. Then you carry the medicine bag from its hook near the back wall and set it on the desk. There is a house call waiting beyond the market, and the patient cannot spare the walk. The bag is smaller than most people expect. It has to be. A doctor who cannot carry their own supplies is not much use beyond the reach of the clinic door. The canvas is faded, patched at both corners, and marked with an old MedTech symbol that has survived long after the company that printed it. Its brass clasp still works if you press it down before pulling the strap. You lay its contents across the desk, one piece at a time. A stoppered bottle of purified water goes first, wrapped in cloth, so it will not strike against the glass beside it. Then come the clean wraps, folded into flat squares and tied with thread. A small tin holds boiled instruments, narrow forceps, a blunt probe, a pair of scissors with one handle repaired in wire. There is a thermometer in a padded sleeve, a few sealed needles, a little alcohol, and a squat jar of salve made from common ingredients that you understand well enough to trust. The medicine itself takes less space than people imagine. There are tablets from a faded pre-war packet, counted carefully. There are 2 small doses of a more valuable treatment, kept apart from the rest. There is 1 stim pack in the bag, not because you expect to use it, but because leaving the clinic without one would be a kind of carelessness. It is a pre-war auto-injector, built for a country that once expected factories to keep making replacements. Here, it is a scarce tool with limits. It can help in the right moment, but it cannot restore a person who returns every day to poor water, thin meals, and work that gives their body no time to recover. You add a pencil, a stack of scrap paper, and a small battery pack. The battery pack is for a Pip-Boy reading, if the patient has one that still holds a charge. Most do not. Those old wrist computers have become family objects as much as tools, passed from one careful owner to another, kept in drawers or wrapped in cloth when not worn. A working one can offer useful information, but no piece of old machinery can tell you whether someone has been sleeping eating or carrying too much weight for too long. For that, you still need questions. At the bottom of the bag, you place a clean hand towel and a square of waxed cloth. The towel is for your hands. The waxed cloth is for making a clean surface wherever you find yourself. Then you close the clasp. The patient lives in a settlement less than an hour from the market road, beyond a low rise where the patched fields begin. The message came with a produce cart at first light. Not an emergency. The household had been waiting for the next day you could come. That is often how it works. People wait because a trip costs time, because walking hurts, because there is planting to do, because somebody must remain near the water pump, because they are not sure their concern deserves a doctor's attention. You know better than to scold them for waiting. Advice that ignores a person's life is only another burden. If someone cannot leave their work for 3 days, telling them to rest for 3 days does not solve much. It only tells them that you have noticed the problem without understanding the arrangement around it. You leave the clinic through the back door, locking it behind you. The trade window stays shuttered. A note on the front bench tells visitors when you expect to return and asks them to speak to the neighboring repair stall if they need help finding clean water or a ride toward Diamond City. The road is busy enough to be reassuring. A pair of Brahmin move slowly ahead of a handcart, their loads covered in canvas against dust and sun. A scavenger walks in the opposite direction, with a bundle of stripped copper tied across their shoulders. Farther down, a trader is arguing mildly with someone over the quality of a box of nails. The words do not carry clearly, only the rhythm of bargaining, familiar as birdsong. Diamond City remains the Commonwealth's most dependable market in this year of 2287. It is not the only place to buy and sell, and it is not the answer to every need, but its walls, its stalls, and its steady traffic give the surrounding roads a shape. A settlement can plan around market days. A farmer can save produce for a buyer who is likely to appear. A doctor can send a request for filters, glass, batteries, and sealed medicine toward a place where those things might actually be found. That steadiness matters. A road is more than ground pressed flat by feet and wheels. It is an agreement repeated often enough that people begin to rely on it. The cart driver expects water at the usual stop. The settlement expects the driver to return with salt, cloth, or news. The person who maintains a bridge expects a little payment from those who cross it. None of this is guaranteed by a distant government office. No clerk sends a letter if the schedule fails. The arrangement holds because enough people have decided that keeping it alive is better than starting over alone. For you, root knowledge is part of medicine. You need to know which well has been cloudy since the last hard rain. You need to know whose field has produced poorly for 2 seasons. You need to know where a patient can find shelter if the weather changes, and which settlements have someone patient enough to boil water properly before offering it to travelers. A fast route is useful. A predictable route is better. The road bends around a stand of thin trees growing through the remains of an old parking lot. Their roots have split the pavement into pale islands. A rusted sign leans at the edge of the shoulder, its printed letters mostly gone. Someone has painted a fresh arrow beneath them in blue, pointing toward the settlement. You follow it. The day is warming now. Heat gathers on the broken road, and the air carries the smell of dry soil, brahmin, and something sweet from a nearby patch of mutfruit. In the distance, rows of crops sit behind a low fence built from boards, old sheet metal, and sections of railing. The fence is not elegant, but it is repaired. That tells you something before you reach the gate. A settlement that repairs its fence may also repair its water barrels. A settlement that repairs its water barrels may be able to follow instructions about keeping food covered and wash water separate from drinking water. These are not certain rules. People are complicated, supplies are scarce, and a neat fence cannot fill an empty pantry. Still, the condition of ordinary things gives you a place to begin. At the gate, a worker lifts one hand in greeting and calls toward the nearest house. The patient is waiting on a shaded porch, seated on an overturned crate with their boots planted carefully on the ground. A second person stands nearby, holding a cup of water and watching with the guarded politeness of someone who has spent weeks worrying without knowing what to do with it. You set down your bag and greet them both. The complaint has been present for a while. Tiredness that does not lift after sleep. A dull ache through the shoulders and lower back. Hands that cramp when lifting buckets. Meals that seem to sit heavily. No single dramatic cause. No obvious moment when the body changed from capable to worn down. These are the complaints that ask the most of you. A broken hinge declares itself. A failing filter makes a noise. A person can continue for months by adjusting around discomfort, taking shorter breaths when lifting, eating less because food makes them feel unwell, sleeping lightly because tomorrow's work is waiting. By the time they ask for help, the problem has often become part of the household routine. You begin with water and shade. You ask when they last drank. You ask where the household draws its water, who fills the barrels, whether the lids fit tightly, and whether anyone else has felt the same way. You ask about breakfast, supper, the midday meal that is easiest to miss when work runs long. You ask what tasks fill the day, which ones cannot be postponed, and whether there is anyone who can take over for an hour. The patient answers slowly at first, then with more detail. They work the fields from morning until the light begins to fall. Lately, they have also been helping at the Brahmin pen, because another worker has been away. The household has been stretching its preserved food until the next market cart arrives. Breakfast is usually something quick. Midday food is often nothing at all. Water comes from the shared pump, but the nearest barrel has a lid that no longer sits straight. There it is. Not one answer. A stack of answers. You wash your hands from your own bottle, using only a little water, and dry them with the clean towel. You take the patient's wrist, count quietly, then use the thermometer. You look at the palms, the nails, the dry skin around the knuckles. You ask them to raise each arm, turn at the waist, stand and sit. You listen to the household member add small details the patient had forgotten. The skipped meals, the late return from the fields, the way they have begun setting down buckets halfway across the yard. Diagnosis in the Commonwealth is rarely a flash of certainty. It is attention. It is knowing which question belongs after the last one. It is noticing that the person's trouble began after the extra work did, and that the household's food stores became less varied around the same time. It is considering what can be changed before reaching for something rare from the medicine bag. You do not promise a simple answer. Instead, you explain what you can see. The body is being asked to do more than it has fuel for. The strain in the shoulders is real. The fatigue is real. The poor meals and irregular water are not small details around the edges of the problem. They are the problem's foundation. The household listens in the quiet way people do when they are hoping for a bottle or a tablet, and receive a list of tasks instead. But tasks can be medicine when they fit the life in front of you. You ask to see the food stores. Inside, the settlement's supplies sit on shelves made from old crates. There are mutfruit, potatoes, and ears of corn. A small crock holds Brahmin milk. Dried strips of meat hang from a line near the ceiling. A few jars of preserved vegetables wait at the back, saved for the end of the week. It is not abundance, but it is more than the patient has been eating. The person responsible for dividing meals joins you near the shelves. They are not defensive. They are tired too, and practical. Every extra portion given to one worker means less for someone else. The arithmetic is plain. This is worth stopping over, because farming is one of the Commonwealth's quiet medical institutions. A settlement with better soil, reliable water, and a regular harvest does more for its people's health than a cupboard full of rare pre-war medicines ever could. Mutfruit, potatoes, and corn are not exciting. They do not come in sealed packets with polished labels. But they can be grown close to home, stored in several forms, and turned into meals that give a worker enough to continue. Brahmin matter for the same reason. They pull carts, provide fertilizer, and offer milk, leather, and meat when a settlement can manage them well. Their presence changes the local economy, but it also changes the clinic's work. Better fed people heal more steadily. Households with enough clean water can keep wounds clean and avoid many ordinary stomach troubles. A field that produces consistently may mean fewer exhausted patients at your desk once the hard season arrives. No doctor works alone, even when the clinic has only one bed and one lamp. The farmer who keeps the soil productive is part of your practice. The person who repairs the pump is part of your practice. The trader who brings salt and sealed jars, the neighbor who takes an extra shift so someone else can sleep, the worker who remembers to cover a water barrel before dust blows in. All of them are doing a portion of the work that keeps people standing. You return to the porch with your paper and pencil. The instructions are simple enough to be followed. The patient needs shorter field shifts for several days, not no work at all. Someone else must take the heaviest buckets. They need food before the morning labor begins, and a small meal brought out at midday, even if it is only corn, mutfruit, and milk. The crooked barrel lid needs fixing today. Water for drinking should be drawn from the cleaner storage container, not the open one near the pen. If the tiredness worsens, if fever appears, or if others in the household begin feeling ill, they must send for you sooner. You write slowly, in large letters. The patient cannot read every word, but the household member can. You also say the instructions aloud twice. Written notes travel farther than memory, but only if someone can use them. From the bag, you offer a small measure of salts to add to clean water and a little salve for the cracked hands. You do not open the cabinet of rare medicine. Nothing you have heard asks for it. Restraint is part of the job. So is explaining why you are not giving someone the most expensive thing you own. When the visit is finished, the household pays in what it can spare. A bundle of clean cloth, several ears of corn, and a promise that the patient will help repair the clinic's front step once their strength returns. You accept the cloth and corn. You write down the repair agreement. The promise is not worthless. In a place where nearly every useful object has been fixed before, a person who can mend wood and set a hinge straight may be worth more than a handful of caps. Still, you make the note. Trust works best when it has something to lean on. As you leave, the patient remains on the porch with a cup of water and a shaded hour ahead of them. It is not a cure. It is not the end of the matter. It is a beginning that fits inside the life they actually have. You take the road back toward the market with the lighter bag at your side and the afternoon heat settling over the fields. Behind you, someone is already carrying a better lid toward the water barrel. The road back is familiar enough that your feet find its steadier patches before you look down. The settlement falls behind you without ceremony. There is no bell at its gate, no clerk to mark that a doctor has come and gone, no wagon waiting to carry a report to a larger office. There is only the note in your bag, the cloth tied neatly beside it, and the knowledge that a household will try a different arrangement tomorrow. That is often what a diagnosis amounts to. People imagine medicine as the moment when an answer arrives. A patient describes a problem. You inspect them with a serious expression. Then, somewhere between the thermometer and the medicine cabinet, the truth reveals itself. Real work is slower than that. A diagnosis begins with listening long enough for the first answer to become less important than the second. It begins with noticing what people leave out because they assume it is ordinary. A person says they are tired. They may mean they wake before dawn to haul water. They may mean they have eaten mostly preserved food for a week. They may mean their bed is beside a rattling generator, or that they have spent every afternoon bent over corn rows because nobody else can take their place. The word tired is a small doorway. You have to find out what is on the other side. At the settlement, you did not begin with the patient's hands, though the cracks across their knuckles were plain enough. You began with their morning. What did they eat? Where did the first cup of water come from? How long had they been working before the sun reached the top of the fence? Did their joints ache before the labor began, or only after? Did the dizziness come when they stood, when they bent, or when they had gone too long without food? None of these questions sounds impressive. They are not supposed to. A doctor with a working scanner can learn useful things in seconds. A doctor with a clinic full of sealed instruments can send samples away, compare numbers, and make decisions with more certainty. You have a thermometer, careful eyes, clean hands, and a few pieces of equipment that still work because you spend part of every week keeping them that way. You also have time when the road allows it. Time is a kind of medicine in the Commonwealth. It is not available in equal portions. The farmer with 3 fields cannot easily spare it. The caravan worker cannot always wait for a return visit. A guard on a rotating watch may arrive only after dark, too tired to explain what hurts. But when someone can sit in the shade and speak without being hurried along, the shape of a problem usually becomes clearer. The patient tells you they have been eating enough. Then their household member quietly mentions that the good food has gone first to the children and to the person doing the heaviest lifting. The patient waves this away. Everybody does that. Everybody does many things that wear them down. You ask about the food stores, and eventually someone sends for the person who keeps the settlement's inventory. This is not an accusation. Food storage is difficult work. A settlement can grow mutfruit, potatoes, and corn, and still find itself short of meals if rain spoils a harvest, if a roof leaks over the preserved goods, or if too much is traded away during a week when caps are needed for repair parts. The storekeeper arrives with dust on their boots and a small notebook folded into a pocket. They are wary at first. Most people are wary when a doctor begins asking how the food is counted. It can sound as if you are about to declare that the settlement has failed at something. Instead, you ask what has been plentiful lately. Corn, they say. Some mutfruit. A little Brahmin milk when the herd is producing well. Potatoes, though fewer than last season. Dried goods from passing traders when the trade is favorable. Eggs sometimes. Fresh greens only when the garden patch has enough water to spare. That is not a bad list. It is better than many. But food is not only about what exists. It is about what reaches a person at the right hour of the day. A bowl of corn after a long shift is still food. It is also a late answer to a body that needed something before the work began. You suggest a simple change. The patient needs a meal in the morning that has more than one thing in it. Corn with milk when possible. Mutfruit cut into it. A portion set aside before the day's labor starts, not saved until everyone is already tired. Water nearby, covered against dust. A rest period before the hands begin to shake from effort. The storekeeper listens with their arms folded. Then they begin thinking aloud about where a covered water container could stand, and whether one of the younger field workers could bring food out at mid-morning. The household member says there is an old shelf in the shed that could be turned into a raised storage place, away from damp ground and wandering animals. This is how a medical visit becomes a settlement conversation. The patient is still sitting there. Their hands still hurt. Their back will still complain when they stand. Yet the problem is no longer resting entirely inside one person's body. It has moved outward, into schedules, food stores, water barrels, shade, and the way work is divided. That is where much of the useful work is. The Commonwealth has no steady public health office sending inspectors along every trade road. There is no regional warehouse that quietly replaces spoiled supplies. Diamond City has doctors, merchants, and more dependable trade than most places. But even the city cannot arrange the daily life of every farm beyond its walls. So each settlement becomes its own small institution. A good field is not only a source of food, it is a medical resource. A reliable pump is not only a convenience. It changes who can stay strong through the summer. A roof over stored grain, a barrel with a lid, a place to wash before preparing meals. These things prevent problems before anyone has to walk down the road to find you. People rarely speak of them that way. They will say the settlement has good water. They will say the corn came in well. They will say the Brahmin are producing, or that the repair worker finally got the purifier to stop sputtering every third day. They will speak of luck usually, because luck is easier to name than a chain of ordinary tasks done properly. But clean water is labor. Regular meals are labor. Soil that keeps producing is labor. Someone clears a clogged intake. Someone carries the bucket. Someone remembers to bring the lid inside before the weather turns. Someone notices that a child has stopped eating at breakfast, or that an older worker is taking longer to cross the yard. In the old world, public health was often invisible when it worked. Pipes were buried. Waste disappeared through systems most people never saw. Food arrived wrapped, labeled, and expected to be safe. The people who maintained those systems were easy to overlook precisely because their work prevented a crisis from becoming visible. Now the systems are smaller, and you can see them with your own eyes. A settlement's health might be a patched hand pump beside a field. It might be 3 rain barrels under a clean gutter. It might be a woman who insists that the cooking cloths are boiled before they are used again. It might be a teenager assigned to keep the root cellar dry, grumbling about the job until they understand that spoiled food is not simply a lost meal. It is a hard week for everybody. Rare medicine matters. You know that better than most. A sealed dose of something pre-war can change what is possible on a difficult day. A stim pack can give a body help when there is no time or safety for a long recovery. Antibiotics, antiseptic, pain relief, clean syringes. These are not luxuries. But medicine works best when it is not asked to carry the whole world alone. No cabinet can replace clean water. No injection can turn an empty pantry into a full one. No doctor can make a person rest if the settlement needs their labor every hour they are awake. That is why you speak with households. That is why you ask the storekeeper what is left in the bins. That is why you look at the distance between a field and the nearest water source, and why you pay attention when someone says the shade tree was cut down last month for firewood. The details are the diagnosis. Before you leave, you write another note, this one for the household. The writing is plain and large. Morning food before work, covered water at the field, 1 rest period before midday. Keep the cracked hands clean and dry when possible. Return to the clinic if the dizziness worsens, if the fever comes back, or if rest does not bring strength. You do not write a long explanation. A sheet of paper has to earn its place in someone's home. It might be used as a shopping list next week, or folded into a pocket until the rain takes the ink away. The important things need to be visible at a glance. The patient's household member reads it aloud. The storekeeper repeats the part about food before work. The patient looks embarrassed by all the attention, but less guarded than before. You have seen that look often. People come to you hoping for a thing they can carry away in a bottle. Sometimes you can give them one. More often, what you offer is permission to take their own condition seriously. A strained body is not laziness. Hunger is not a failure of character. A person who needs water, shade, sleep, and a meal before lifting a crate has not become weak because they need these things. They have simply reached the point where the day's work has begun taking more than it gives back. The settlement has to decide whether it can afford to notice. Usually it can. Not perfectly. Not all at once. But a small adjustment made early is cheaper than losing a worker for days. The practical argument is often the one that lands. You have learned not to resent that. People do not need the finest reason to do the right thing. They need a reason that fits inside their available choices. The produce and cloth from the visit sit in your bag as you walk away. The payment is modest, though useful. The cloth will become wraps after it has been washed and boiled. The corn will be supper, perhaps with a little preserved meat if you decide the clinic's supplies can spare it. The note remains with the household. By tomorrow, it may be pinned beside the cooking shelf. It may be tucked into the storekeeper's notebook. It may be ignored for half the morning, then remembered when the patient tries to stand too quickly, and someone says, "No, sit down first. Eat something." That is not a dramatic victory. It is a change in the shape of a day. And in the Commonwealth, where so much depends on whether people can continue doing the work in front of them, a changed day can be enough to matter. By the time you return to the clinic, the road has gone pale beneath the afternoon sun. The settlement behind you is quiet in the practical way of a place working through the hottest part of the day. A few people move between the fields. Someone has pulled a cart into the narrow strip of shade beside a wall and is tightening a wheel with a borrowed wrench. Farther off, a Brahmin gives one low complaint and then settles again. Nobody is in a hurry unless the work itself requires it. Your bag feels different now that it contains produce and folded cloth instead of a full morning's supplies. Not lighter exactly. Corn and cloth have their own weight. But the bag has become familiar with the day's exchanges. Clean wraps went out. Useful things came back. Instructions remain in a house where someone may or may not follow them. This is how the clinic keeps moving. The front shutters are still open when you reach the building. A stripe of sunlight crosses the waiting bench outside, leaving the far end too hot to use. The trade window is closed for the afternoon lull, its wooden panel set in place and secured from inside. A note is tucked beneath the latch, written in a careful block hand by a neighbor who stopped by while you were gone. Back after sundown. Need advice about the little one's cough. You read it twice, then fold it and put it beside the ledger. A cough can mean many things. Dust from a dry road, smoke from a bad stove, a chest that has worked too hard in cold air, a room where too many people sleep beside too little ventilation. You cannot answer the question from a note, and there is no use pretending otherwise. But you can make sure the kettle is full, the clean cups are ready, and there is enough lamp fuel to keep the clinic open after dark. Inside, the air is warmer than you left it. The water filter has been working in your absence, drawing steadily from the storage barrel and giving back a thin, dependable stream into the covered jug beneath it. You set the produce on the counter, hang your bag from its peg, and listen. The filter has its own language. A healthy one makes a soft, even pull through its housing, followed by the occasional tap of a drop striking the jug's bottom. A clogged filter sounds strained. A cracked connection gives a wet little sputter. An empty intake pipe makes a hollow rattle that can be mistaken for something worse until you learn what you are hearing. This one is steady. You place a hand against the metal casing. It is warm, but not hot. The cloth around the lower connection is dry. The jug beneath is filling slowly enough that it seems almost rude to call it progress. But clean water rarely arrives with much ceremony. That is one of the quiet laws of this work. The things that keep people well are often slow. A full jug, a boiled wrap, A meal taken before exhaustion has settled too deeply into the body. None of it looks impressive from across the room. None of it can be injected, swallowed, or carried in a bright red case. Still, the clinic would fail without them. You roll up your sleeves and begin with the instruments. The morning's work has left a small collection of metal tools on the tray beside the wash basin. There are forceps with worn grips, a narrow probe, a pair of scissors that have been sharpened so many times their blades no longer meet neatly at the tip, and a small clamp whose spring catches when it is cold. Each tool is ordinary. Each has to be cleaned as if it matters, because it does. You rinse away what you can with boiled water that is cooled enough to handle. Then you scrub with soap, working the brush into hinges and grooves where dust likes to stay. The tools go into the pot one by one. The pot sits over the small stove at the back of the clinic, and soon the room carries the plain mineral smell of heating water. While it warms, you sort the cloth from the settlement. It is better than you expected. 2 pieces are soft enough to become bandages after a hard wash and a long boil. One is a coarse square of old work shirt, too rough for a wrap, but useful for cleaning counters, tools, and the clinic floor. Another has a frayed seam that will need mending before it can carry any weight at all. Nothing comes into the medical cabinet untouched. Cloth can look clean and still carry the dust of a field, old oil from a workshop, or the residue of 100 ordinary tasks. You separate the pieces into piles and make a note beside tomorrow's work. Wash, boil, dry, fold. This is what an afternoon at the workbench looks like. Not a dramatic recovery. Not a patient sitting up suddenly, restored by a miracle pulled from a box. It is water rising toward a boil. It is the scratch of your pencil on paper. It is a stack of cloth becoming useful because you took the time to make it safe. The old world had rooms built for this work, large clinics with tiled walls, steel cabinets, electric sterilizers, deliveries that arrived on schedule, and factories turning out supplies by the crate. Some of those things still exist in pieces. You find them whenever you trade near Diamond City or pick through the stock of a careful caravan. A sealed packet of gauze, a glass vial with a medtech label still clear beneath the dust. A thermometer that has outlived every person who knew where it was manufactured. A diagnostic screen with a cracked casing, its display fading at the edges, still able to give a useful reading if its battery is charged and its wires have not corroded. The name MedTech appears on more equipment than anyone in your clinic needs to think about. It is stamped into metal, printed on faded paper sleeves, embossed on the side of a case that has been opened and closed for generations. Before the war, the company sold the promise that medicine could be packaged, standardized, and made available wherever a customer could pay. The promise depended on a great deal more than the label. It depended on mines producing metal, on factories producing glass, on trucks and warehouses and clean water systems, on trained workers, regulated ingredients, power stations, roads, schedules, and people whose entire job was to make sure a missing screw did not stop a machine. Now a medicine cabinet contains fragments of that enormous arrangement. A few sealed items, a few tools, a few pieces of equipment maintained long past the point anyone expected them to last. The old labels can make it seem as though the object carries its own authority. You learn quickly that it does not. A thermometer is helpful only if its scale is readable. A stim pack is helpful only if it has been stored properly and used with judgment. A medical scanner is helpful only if someone knows what its reading means and what it does not mean. The clinic runs less on old technology than on attention. You lift the clamp from the boiling pot with the forceps, set it on a clean cloth, and wait for the metal to cool. The hinge still catches. You carry it to the workbench by the window, where a tray of tools sits beside a small bottle of scavenged machine oil. The workbench was not made for medicine. It was once part of somebody's repair shop, with burn marks on the wood, and a row of shallow cuts where a blade slipped during some long-ago job. You have added shelves above it, hung a lamp nearby, and kept the surface clean enough that it now serves several purposes at once. Here you repair what cannot be replaced. A loose hinge on the medicine cabinet, the latch on a storage box, the handle of the kettle, a cracked buckle on the bag you use for house calls, a Pip-Boy battery compartment when a patient needs a reading, and the old device has decided to lose contact at the worst possible time. Your hands know the difference between medical work and repair work, though the Commonwealth often refuses to separate them. The same patience is needed for both. You hold the clamp open, work a drop of oil into the hinge, close it, open it again, and feel the spring begin to move more freely. A doctor here is never only a doctor. You depend on the trader who notices a sealed package buried beneath a pile of rusted cans and sets it aside because they know you will pay fairly. You depend on the tinkerer who can rebuild a connector from wire and scrap metal. You depend on the farmer who grows enough food that a recovering neighbor can eat regularly for a week. You depend on the water worker who keeps sediment out of the intake pipe and knows when a purifier has started asking for parts it does not yet need. No one in the Commonwealth is entirely self-sufficient, no matter how much they enjoy saying otherwise. A settlement with clean water but no way to mend a pump is not secure. A settlement with food but no storage loses its harvest to damp and pests. A clinic with good tools but no cloth, no alcohol, and no reliable trade route becomes a locked room full of objects that cannot help anyone. This is why you keep your debts carefully and your friendships honestly. It is why you pay for repairs when you can, trade advice when you cannot, and avoid promising supplies that have not yet reached your shelf. The afternoon heat presses against the window. Outside, a cart rolls past at a slow pace, its wheels complaining at each turn. From somewhere down the road comes the thin, cheerful noise of Diamond City Radio, carried by an open doorway, and a radio turned slightly too loud. The song is old, but you do not need to know its words to recognize the rhythm. It belongs to another century and another set of people, yet it still finds its way into the spaces between work. You move from the bench to the desk in the corner. The terminal on it is older than the clinic, older perhaps than the building itself. Its screen gives off a greenish light when it feels cooperative. Some days it needs a careful tap near the side panel before it wakes. You use it for copied supply lists, old medical reference pages, and notes when you want a record that cannot be ruined by a spilled cup of water. But paper remains more dependable. Your paper files sit in a shallow drawer beneath the desk. bound with string in small stacks. You do not write every private detail in them. A settlement is too small for that kind of record to stay private for long. The person who repairs your window might also be related to a patient. The person waiting outside may know the person who was here before them. A sheet left open on the wrong desk can travel farther than a caravan, so your notes are useful without being cruel. Water source uncertain. Rest advised. Return in 3 days. No heavy lifting this week. Eat before morning shift. Filter checked. New wraps issued. Payment pending. The details that matter to care go down. The details that belong only to the patient stay with you. Privacy, in a place where everyone depends on everyone else, is not the same as secrecy. It is a habit of restraint. It means not repeating what you learned because the story is interesting. It means not letting a debt become gossip. It means speaking to the person in front of you, rather than about them to the next person who enters. You sharpen your pencil with a small knife and update the morning notes. The farmer with fatigue will need a follow-up if the new routine changes nothing. The caravan worker should replace the wrap around their wrist before the next long haul. You add a reminder to ask the caravan master whether they can bring sealed needles on their return route, if they return at all. Then you count what is left. 3 clean bandage rolls. 2 jars of antiseptic, 1 already low. Enough soap for perhaps another week if nobody wastes it. A small reserve of pain medicine. A few stim packs, untouched today, stored in the cabinet where the afternoon sun cannot reach them. Their presence is reassuring, but not comforting enough to make you careless. You close the drawer and sit for a moment with both hands resting on the desk. The clinic is quiet. The pot has stopped steaming. The repaired clamp lies on its cloth, clean and ready for the next use. In the corner, the filter continues its patient work. Soon the road will wake again. People will come off their shifts. The waiting bench will fill with those who put off their aches until there is finally a spare hour to mention them. You will open the trade window, pour water into cups, listen to symptoms that have been carried around all day, and decide what can be done with what you have. For now, there is the workbench, the ledger, and the small order you have made from the afternoon. It is not much, seen from outside. Inside the clinic, it is nearly everything. By the time the sun has begun its slow lean toward evening, the road has changed character. The carts are fewer now. The loudest trading is done. People who spent the morning moving goods toward Diamond City are either inside its walls or on their way back to smaller places, like this one. A thin powder of dust sits over the road, over the waiting bench, over the low sill of your trade window. The heat has not gone away exactly, but it has lost its sharp edge. This is when the familiar patients arrive. They come after work because work comes first. It nearly always does. A guard from the nearby fields sits on the bench and removes one boot with a long breath. The sole has worn thin at the heel, and the same uneven step has made one knee ache for days. A woman from the wash line brings her youngest sibling, not because the child is in immediate trouble, but because a cough has stayed longer than it should. A scavenger who has spent the week sorting scrap beneath a patched awning asks if the dust in their throat means they need medicine. Often, it does not. Often, the medicine is a cup of clean water a day away from whatever is irritating them, and a plain instruction that someone will actually follow. You have learned not to give advice designed for a world with paid leave, stocked pharmacies, and a clinic on every block. Telling a field worker to rest for a week is not advice. It is a fantasy. Telling them to change which hand carries the water buckets, to take the shorter path around the irrigation trench, and to come back if the swelling has not eased in 3 days is something they can use. The guard with the worn boot sits on the examination stool while you press gently around the knee, asking where it stiffens, when it started, whether the pain changes after sleep. They answer with the careful patience of someone who knows that saying too little wastes your time, but saying too much may reveal how close they are to needing a replacement shift. The settlement has enough guards for its walls and fields, but not many to spare. Everyone knows this. Nobody needs to say it aloud. You wrap the knee with a cloth support, not tight enough to restrict movement, and show them how to adjust it. Then you ask about the boot. It is the boot, they say. It is partly the boot, you reply. They give you a look that says this is not the answer they hoped to buy. You explain that the knee will not improve if the worn heel keeps turning their step inward. They can trade for a new sole, perhaps, or find somebody with leather and patience. Until then, they should switch boots when they can, dry the old one fully after rain, and stop pretending that a strip of wire is a repair. That earns the smallest smile. Payment is a promise of work. The guard knows enough about hinges and locks to help you reinforce the back shutter before the next bad stretch of weather. You write it down in the ledger, then write the date beside it. The ledger is not a cold thing, though some people treat it that way. It is a map of favors moving through the settlement. 2 hours spent fixing your shutter becomes a knee wrap now. A basket of potatoes becomes 3 doses of cough medicine. A repaired water line means a household can settle an old debt without handing over caps they need for seed. You do not keep the clinic open alone. That is easy to forget when someone is seated across from you, waiting for an answer. Your shelves make you look independent. The clean cloth, the labeled jars, the cabinet with its working latch, all of it suggests a person with control over their own small corner of the Commonwealth. But the cloth came from somebody's loom or salvaged bundle. The soap came from a trader who knew a trader. The cabinet hinge was tightened with a screw taken from a ruined appliance and fitted by a tinkerer who accepted payment in preserved food. The water in the wash basin is clean because other people maintain the filter, carry replacement parts, keep the pump clear, and notice when the rain barrel has collected too much grit. Medical knowledge gives you a certain kind of authority. It does not give you independence. In a small settlement, status is never as simple as who gives orders. The person who owns the largest Brahmin herd may have influence because they can feed people through a poor season. The person who repairs generators may have influence because lamps, radios, and water pumps become silent without them. A trader who has a reliable route to Diamond City can make promises that matter more than a full purse of caps. You have authority because people bring you questions they do not bring to anyone else. They tell you when they are too tired to finish a shift. They tell you when a household has been stretching water rations. They tell you which food stores smell wrong, which child has stopped eating. Which worker is waking too often in the night? Those are private facts. In a settlement this small, private facts are valuable. You keep them close. Not because you are above gossip. Nobody is entirely above gossip. You hear things at the trade window, at the water point, while someone waits for a bandage to be tied. But you know the difference between a story that passes an idle hour and a piece of information that can change how a person is treated by their neighbors. A worker who cannot lift as much as before may fear losing the better shifts. A caravan hand with a recurring cough may fear being left behind at the next departure. A farmer whose household has run short on food may fear that others will assume poor planning when the real cause was a broken tool and a bad patch of soil. Your job requires people to speak honestly. Honesty requires that they believe you will not carry their words directly to the market. So you ask questions carefully. You write notes in a hand that only you can read quickly. When someone asks how their neighbor is doing, you answer with the amount that belongs to them, which is usually very little. The scavenger, with the dusty throat, leaves with a cup of water and a strip of cloth to tie over their mouth while sorting old insulation. The coughing child gets a warm drink, a look at the throat, and instructions for the household to keep the sleeping space aired out whenever the weather permits. Their older sibling nods solemnly, taking the instructions as if they were a contract. Then, after a short gap in the line, a worker from the southern plots steps inside and closes the door behind them. They are not injured. Their clothes are intact, their face steady, their voice low. I was near an old runoff ditch, they say. Only for a little while. The Pip-Boy clicked some. You motion toward the stool. Radiation worries settle differently on people than an ordinary ache. A strained wrist gives them something to point at. A fever gives them heat, a number, a visible reason to stop. Rads are quieter. Most people understand only the broad outline. Too much is bad. Old places can hold it for generations. And a working Pip-Boy notices what the eye cannot. You do not dismiss the concern. You also do not let fear turn a brief exposure into a verdict. First, you ask where the ditch was, whether the water was moving or standing, how long they stayed, whether they drank from it, and whether their clothes got wet. You ask what the Pip-Boy reading did after they walked away. You look at their hands and boots, then at the edge of one sleeve where dried mud has gathered. The answer is reassuring, as much as anything can be reassuring here. The reading rose near the ditch and settled once they left. They did not drink. They washed their hands before eating. Their boots are dirty, but the mud is dry. You tell them to leave the boots outside tonight. Rinse the cloth parts with clean water if they can spare it, and do not bring the mud into the sleeping room. Drink from the settlement pump, not from the nearest barrel. Eat a proper meal. Check the Pip-Boy again in the morning before work. If it climbs while you are nowhere near the ditch, come back, you say. If you feel sick, come back. And do not take that route again just because it saves 10 minutes. They exhale through their nose. It does save 10 minutes. It saves 10 minutes today. That is the practical limit of your authority. You can explain risk. You can offer a safer routine. You cannot make the southern plots closer, the paths cleaner, or the settlement rich enough to replace every questionable water source with a sealed pipe. The old world left behind devices that can measure invisible trouble with a cheerful little click. It did not leave enough working filters, enough sealed containers, or enough trained people to make every choice easy. Still, habits matter. Keep drinking water covered. Do not eat with dirty hands. Pay attention to the Pip-Boy instead of treating its warning as background noise. Avoid standing water near old industrial ground. Wash work clothes apart from bedding when possible. These are small things, and small things are what most people can afford. The worker pays for the visit with a handful of clean corn and a promise to bring more after the next harvest. You accept the corn. It will go into tonight's meal, and the promise will go into the ledger. Outside, the waiting bench is empty for the first time since the afternoon began. You sit in the doorway with a bowl balanced on one knee. There is corn, tattoos cooked soft in a little water, and a narrow strip of Brahmin cheese from the household near the pump. It is plain food, but it is warm. You eat slowly, watching the road without making a show of watching it. A trade cart rolls past toward Diamond City, its wheels complaining at every turn. Behind it comes a pair of settlers carrying tools over their shoulders, talking about a fence post that will need resetting before morning. Farther off, where the road bends around a line of scrub and broken pavement, a radio catches the air. Diamond City radio, faint and uneven at this distance. The signal rises, breaks apart, then returns with a voice introducing a song from before the war. You cannot make out every word. You do not need to. The sound is familiar enough to mark the hour. People pass your clinic and nod. One asks after the guard's knee. Another wonders whether you have spare soap. A third points at the repaired shutter and says it looks better than it did last week. You answer what can be answered. The guard's knee is being watched. The soap is not for sale today. The shutter will hold if the promised repair work is done properly. This is how the clinic stays open. Not through a single cache of rare medicine, not through some forgotten machine that solves every problem, and not because anyone has made you indispensable. It stays open because the settlement keeps bringing you its small concerns before they become larger ones. Because people trade what they have. Because someone carries clean water. Because someone grows food. Because someone repairs a hinge, patches a roof, mends a boot, drives a cart, or remembers that the filter has started making the wrong sound. You finish the last of the meal and set the bowl beside the door. The light is lower now. Soon you will need to close the window again, take stock of the cabinet, and prepare for whoever arrives before evening has fully settled. For a few minutes, though, you remain where you are. The radio crackles in the distance. The road carries its last workers home, and the clinic, held up by 100 modest exchanges, waits quietly for the next knock. The next knock comes before you have carried the bowl inside. It is not one person this time. It is the uneven, patient sound of several pairs of boots stopping outside the clinic, followed by the creak of a cart settling on its springs. Through the open shutter, you see a Brahmin cart drawn close to the road, its load covered in canvas and tied down with rope that has been repaired so many times it looks more knot than line. The caravan has timed its arrival well enough. There is still daylight for trade, but not much of it. The crew wants to reach Diamond City before the gates close, or at least get close enough to spend the night at a familiar stop along the road. They do not have time for long conversations. they do have time to make sure their supplies will last. The caravan master stands at the window with a small notebook tucked into one hand. Behind them, the others keep busy without being told. One loosens a harness strap. Another checks the cart wheels. A third fills a metal cup from a sealed water container and drinks slowly, as if making the water last longer by paying attention to it. "We heard you had antiseptic," the caravan master says. "You do." "A little." You invite them through the side door, one at a time, not because the clinic is grand enough to need rules about traffic, but because too many people in the small room would turn a simple trade into confusion. The waiting bench outside can hold the rest. The first crew member who enters sets a hand on the counter and looks around at the shelves. Their eyes move over the glass jars, folded cloth, the bottles with handwritten labels, the cabinet with its repaired hinge. People who travel understand shelves. They understand that a full shelf means planning, and an empty one means somebody has already been forced to choose. You take out your ledger. The caravan has been through before, though not every week. Their route joins several settlements to the south and west before bending toward Diamond City. They carry preserved food, cloth, old machine parts, tools, filters when they can find them, and whatever smaller goods can survive a journey over broken roads. They bring news too, though news is never as dependable as tubing or batteries. This time, their needs are plain. They want antiseptic, clean wraps, a few pain tablets from your limited cabinet, and 2 sealed medical packs that you have been holding back for months. You do not answer immediately. Instead, you ask what they have. That is the first rule of medicine on the road. Before you hand over anything useful, you need to know what might replace it. A person can offer caps, and caps are welcome. Caps buy supplies in Diamond City. They buy a trader's attention. They may buy a replacement part from a stall whose owner has learned to recognize you. But caps cannot clean a wound. They cannot line a cracked water hose. They cannot keep a lantern lit or make a damaged thermometer work. The caravan master opens the notebook and begins the inventory. They have replacement tubing, still sealed in waxed wrapping. They have a bundle of small batteries, not new but tested. They have 2 bottles of preserved antiseptic, the kind that smells sharp enough to clear a room. There is a packet of needles in old packaging, a roll of clean rubber seals, 3 jars of medicinal salve from a settlement that grows the plants for it, and several boxes of dry goods that are more useful than exciting. You examine each thing without hurry. The tubing matters. Your water filter has been steady lately, but steady is not the same as permanent. The batteries matter too, especially for the small reading device you use when somebody brings in an old Pip-Boy and wants help making sense of its numbers. The antiseptic is valuable, though you look at the seals twice before accepting it. A good label means little. A sealed bottle means more. A sealed bottle that has not leaked through 2 caravan journeys means more still. The caravan master watches you work. Trade in the Commonwealth is often presented as a matter of quick hands and quicker guesses. Someone spreads goods across a counter. Someone else points, shakes their head, names a number, and both sides leave feeling they have won. That happens, certainly, but the trade that keeps a clinic alive is slower. You are not exchanging one thing for another. You are comparing future needs that have not happened yet. A battery is not merely a battery. It is a future reading taken in poor light. It is a lamp that stays on when the sun is gone. It is a chance to keep an old piece of equipment useful for another season. Tubing is not merely tubing. It is the difference between a working filter and a bucket placed beneath a leak. Even the simplest supplies carry a chain of labor behind them. Someone found the old stock. Someone decided it was worth carrying. Someone loaded it onto a cart. Someone maintained the cart. Someone knew which roads still connected settlements that had something to sell with settlements that needed it. There is no central hospital in the Commonwealth sending crates where they are needed. There is no factory line you can call when the cabinet runs low. Diamond City has merchants, workshops, doctors, market stalls, and a steadier flow of goods than most places. But it is not a system built to reach every roadside clinic by itself. The caravan is part of that system. It moves in pieces. A few filters here, a spool of wire there, a sack of grain from one farm, a jar of antiseptic from another, a box of pre-war tablets that has passed through several hands and somehow remained dry. The goods are modest, but the route is what gives them meaning. For a doctor, the caravan is not simply a customer arriving at the end of the day. It is a moving supply shelf. You place the useful items in separate piles on the counter. The caravan crew needs enough to continue. You need enough to serve the people who will wake tomorrow, within walking distance of this clinic. Neither need cancels the other. That is what makes the decision difficult. The two sealed medical packs remain on the shelf behind you. They are not magical. Nothing in the clinic is magical. Each pack contains ordinary things made scarce by distance and time. Sterile dressings, basic tools, sealed materials that you cannot reproduce with boiled cloth and careful hands. You keep them for the moments when ordinary substitutes are not enough. The crew asks for both. You offer one. There is a pause. Not an angry one. The caravan master has expected this. They have their own calculations to make, and you can see them doing the same work you have done. Counting days, weighing routes, remembering which settlement might have a doctor, which one might have only a water pump and a locked shed. One now, you say. The rest in wraps, antiseptic, and tablets. I can spare those. The caravan master nods toward the cabinet. And the second pack on credit? You look down at the ledger. Credit is a dangerous word in a place where people prefer to hold something solid in their hands. A cap can be counted. A cloth roll can be inspected. A bottle can be turned upside down and checked for leaks. A promise is harder. Still, much of the Commonwealth runs on promises. The farmer plants before knowing the weather will cooperate. The trader loads a cart before knowing the buyer will still have caps when they arrive. The repair worker fixes a pump in the expectation that the settlement will provide food after harvest. Nobody calls this insurance, because there are no officers issuing policies and no clerk stamping forms behind a clean desk. But it serves a similar purpose. Trust spreads risk across time. You know this caravan's route. You know the cart's patched side panel and the caravan master's careful notebook. You have seen them return when they said they would return. More important, other people have seen it too. A reputation on the road is not made from one dramatic act. It is made from small agreements kept through bad weather, thin markets, broken wheels, and weeks when there is simply not enough to go around. You ask what they can promise. The answer is practical. On their return trip, they will bring 2 rolls of proper bandage cloth, if they can secure them in the city. If not, they will bring the equivalent in filters, batteries, or sealed supplies you approve in advance. They will also carry a note to a Diamond City trader, who sometimes has access to medical odds and ends. You consider the offer. The clinic needs the trade now. The crew may need the pack before they reach the city. And the future payment, if it arrives, would cover more than the value of 1 sealed package. It would strengthen a route that brings you things the nearby farms cannot grow, and the nearby tinkerers cannot rebuild. But the second pack is still a reserve. You take it from the shelf and set it on the counter, without sliding it across. 1 condition, you say. The return payment comes here first, not after another run, not when the market is better. Here, on the way back. The caravan master agrees. Then you write. The paper is thin but clean. You record the date, the goods exchanged, the second medical pack, and the expected return payment. You write the caravan's route in plain terms, not a name that might mean nothing to another reader years from now. South Road, Diamond City. Return within 3 weeks if weather and trade allow. You write the agreement so that it can survive memory. That is the quiet purpose of a ledger. It does not make people honest. It does not force a cart to return. It cannot protect you from a road closing or a trader failing to find what they promised. It does something smaller. It gives the next conversation a place to begin. When the caravan returns, you will not have to rely on a vague feeling that they owe you something. The page will show what left the clinic and what was promised in return. If you are away, someone else can read it. If the caravan master changes, the paper remains. If the clinic has to choose between helping a neighbor and extending another line of credit, the old agreements are there to guide the decision. You ask the caravan master to mark the page. They do, with a neat hand. Then the trade begins in earnest. You hand over wraps first, counted in pairs. Next comes the antiseptic, then the tablets, then the single-sealed medical pack. The crew member at the counter places the tubing, batteries, and bottles into your care with equal attention. Nothing about the exchange is hurried now. Outside, the Brahmin shifts its weight. The cart creaks. The remaining daylight has turned the road pale and dusty. Somewhere farther off, a door closes. The settlement is beginning its evening habit of gathering what it needs indoors before the lamps come on. The caravan master counts out a small stack of caps as well. Not enough to change the balance of the trade, but enough to matter. You place them in the cash box, then record them beside the goods. The crew thanks you in the plain way people do when they expect to meet again. You do not wish them luck in grand terms. You tell them to keep the medical pack dry, to store the antiseptic out of direct heat, and to send word if the return trip will be delayed. The caravan master promises they will. Soon they are loading the last items into the cart. You stand in the doorway as they pull away toward Diamond City. The road takes them between low fences and fields that have been worked carefully enough to look almost settled. Their wheels leave fresh marks over older ones. By morning, other feet and carts will cross those marks, and by next week, the road will look unchanged. Inside, The clinic feels different by only a few objects. A new roll of tubing rests beside the filter tools. Batteries sit in a jar near the workbench. The antiseptic bottles wait to be checked again, then labeled and stored. One shelf holds fewer supplies than it did an hour ago. Another holds more. You close the ledger and leave it on the counter. Medicine on credit is never comfortable. It asks you to give something real to someone whose return is not guaranteed. Yet refusing every promise would leave the clinic isolated, with its supplies untouched until they spoil and its doors closed to everyone who cannot pay in the right form at the right moment. So you make the agreement. You keep the reserve. You write everything down. And as evening settles over the road, you begin putting the new supplies where tomorrow's hands will be able to find them. The evening does not arrive all at once. It gathers in the places that daylight leaves behind. First, the far end of the road loses its color. The fences become thin, dark lines against the fields. Then the small trade window begins to reflect more of the clinic's interior than it shows of the world outside. By the time you slide its wooden shutter into place, the last cart has passed toward Diamond City, carrying its slow rattle away with it. You lower the bar across the shutter and test it with one hand. The gesture is ordinary. It is also necessary. During the day, the window is where the clinic meets the road. Through it come caps, cloth, questions, gossip, bottles with uncertain labels, and people who would rather ask for advice without stepping all the way inside. At dusk, it becomes a boundary again. The clinic is still a place where anyone can come for help, but it is no longer a place where supplies sit within reach of every passing hand. You sweep the counter with a clean rag, collecting dry leaves, a twist of packing string, and the fine dust that finds its way into every room in the Commonwealth, no matter how firmly the door is shut. Outside, the waiting bench stands empty. It is a plain thing, built from old boards and repaired more than once. One end dips slightly where generations of tired workers have settled onto it, waiting for a turn at the wash basin or a few minutes of your attention. In the morning, you will check the loose board beneath the seat. Tonight, you run your palm along the surface and brush away a few grains of dirt. Then you carry the lantern inside. The clinic has a particular order after the last patient leaves. It is not the sharp order of the morning, when every jar is aligned and every cloth still folded. It is a used order. A cup sits upside down beside the basin. A chair is not quite pushed beneath the table. The examination blanket has been shaken out, but not yet put away. The room holds the evidence of work without looking chaotic. You prefer it this way for a little while. A completely untouched clinic would mean no one had come. No one had asked. No one had found the road safe enough or the price manageable enough to seek help. Empty shelves are a problem, but a room that has done nothing all day is its own kind of failure. You begin at the water filter. The new tubing from the caravan lies where you placed it earlier, clean and coiled beside the tools. You inspect the fitting already attached to the filter, then the small catch basin beneath it. The water passing through the system is not abundant, but it is steady. That distinction matters more than many people realize. A settlement can endure a short shortage if everyone knows it is short. People ration. They share information. They postpone washing clothes and save the better water for drinking. What wears a community down is uncertainty, a pump that works one day and fails the next, a barrel that looks full until someone discovers the water inside has turned, a filter that has gone too long without cleaning because everyone assumed someone else had checked it. You lift the lid and listen. The machine gives its familiar low vibration. Not silence, not a harsh rattle, not the irregular sputter that tells you sediment has found its way into the wrong part of the system. You do not need to understand every piece of pre-war engineering to know what a healthy machine sounds like. You only need to pay attention every day. You make a small mark in the maintenance notebook. Tomorrow, before the first appointment, you will change the outer cloth screen. Not because it has failed, but because it will fail eventually. And the easiest repairs are the ones done before anyone notices they are needed. From the filter, you move to the lamps. There are 3 in the clinic. One above the counter, one near the examination table, and one smaller lamp by the back shelf where you keep the ledger. You check the fuel in each reservoir. The counter lamp has enough for most of tomorrow evening. The table lamp has less than that. You refill it carefully from the stored bottle, keeping the flame low and your movements slow. Lamp fuel is another kind of medicine, though nobody calls it that. Without light, you miss the small signs. A cracked seal around a jar lid, dampness in a cloth wrap, a label beginning to peel, the pale discoloration of a wound that needs watching, the difference between clear water and water that only looks clear in a shadowed room. Good light does not cure anyone. It lets you see what must be done. The old world made this easier, at least for those who could afford to walk into a building with a working grid and expect the lights to answer a switch. In the Commonwealth, light comes from fuel, batteries, repaired wiring, careful scavenging, and someone remembering to check the level before bedtime. There are no factories nearby producing a fresh shipment of medical lamps. No public office sends a technician when a wire frays. The clinic stays lit because a trader carries a replacement part, because a tinkerer can make an old connector fit, because a farmer pays an old debt with lamp oil, because you keep a spare wick folded in a tin. That is how much of medicine works now. Not as a single profession standing apart from everything else, but as a chain of ordinary people doing their parts well enough that the next person can continue. You lock the medicine cabinet. The hinge you repaired earlier holds firm. Behind the glass are the things people notice first when they think of a doctor. Sealed medicines, carefully folded wraps, small bottles, labeled tins, and the few stim packs you keep for situations where their speed and strength are worth the cost. It is an impressive collection only from a distance. Up close, each empty space is visible. You know how many antiseptic bottles remain. You know which pain reliever is down to its last small packet. You know that the thermometer works, though its case has a hairline crack. You know that the package of clean needles should last if the road stays open, and if no one needs more than the clinic can reasonably provide. This is the limit of your work, and it is worth saying plainly. You can clean an instrument. You can recognize patterns in fatigue, fever, poor diet, overwork, and bad water. You can advise a settlement to rotate labor before one reliable worker becomes unable to work at all. You can keep notes. You can make a difficult supply stretch longer than it otherwise would. You can offer people a better chance of getting through an ordinary illness without letting it become something larger. But skill cannot build a public health system around you. It cannot make a factory produce fresh medicine on schedule. It cannot guarantee that every household has clean water, enough food, warm shelter, and time to rest. It cannot make care universal simply because you believe it should be. A clinic like yours is useful, sometimes deeply useful, but it is not a hospital network. It is not a government stockpile. It is not a world where a person can be treated without first wondering what they can trade. In the years before the bombs, medicine was also uneven. There were shelves and clinics and corporations with polished advertisements, but access still had a price, and many of the companies that sold health as comfort treated people as customers first. MedTech made equipment for a world of clean delivery routes, trained staff, and replacement parts ordered by catalogue. The name still survives on the side of an old diagnostic box in your back room. The system that made the box did not plan for you. It did not plan for a doctor outside Diamond City to keep it running with salvaged wire and batteries traded from a caravan. It did not plan for a clinic to measure wealth in boiled cloth, functioning filters, and whether the person who promised to return next month actually does. Yet here you are, making the fragments useful. A light knock comes at the front door. Not the firm knock of someone with a cart outside. Not the quick tapping of a trader who wants to know whether you are still buying scrap. This is slower, hesitant. You set down the cabinet key and open the inner latch. A neighbor stands on the step with their shoulders pulled tight against the cooling air. You know them well enough to recognize their usual rhythm. They work steadily, speak little in a crowd, and usually leave a visit with the shortest possible question. Tonight, they are holding a wrapped bundle against their chest, though there is nothing in it that needs examining. "I'm sorry," they say. "I know you're closing." You tell them that closing is not the same as disappearing. They step inside. The concern is not dramatic. Their cough has lingered longer than they expected. Their sleep has been poor. They are worried that the tiredness means something worse than tiredness. You ask about their water, their meals, whether the cough is changing, whether they have been working through the midday heat, whether anyone else in the household has the same complaint. The answers come slowly, then all at once. They have been taking the longest shifts because another worker strained a shoulder. They have skipped the evening meal twice to save food for the household. Their water barrel was left uncovered during a dusty afternoon. They have not rested because there is always another task waiting, and because in a settlement like this, rest can feel like asking someone else to carry your share. You listen. Sometimes reassurance is not telling a person that nothing is wrong. It is giving them a clear picture of what they can do before worry turns every small sensation into a warning. You check their temperature. You listen to their breathing. You find no immediate sign that calls for the locked cabinet or a rushed trip toward the city. What they need first is simpler, and in this place, simplicity is never the same as ease. Clean water, covered and boiled, if there is any doubt. Food at regular times, even if the portion is small. A full night's sleep. No long shift tomorrow. They make a face at that last instruction. You tell them they can argue with you after they have followed it. From the shelf, You take a measured packet of basic medicine and a small cloth wrap containing dried tea leaves from a local grower. It is not a cure in itself. It is something warm to drink, something that encourages them to sit still long enough to breathe steam and let the evening settle. You do not give away more than the clinic can spare. You do not make promises that your supplies cannot keep. Care requires boundaries as much as kindness does. If every worried visitor left with the same rare medicine, the shelf would be empty when someone truly needed it. So you give what fits the problem. You explain why. You tell them what changes would mean they should return at once, and what signs can wait until morning. They nod, calmer now that the instructions have shape. Before leaving, they offer to pay next week. You tell them to bring clean cloth if they have it. If not, they can settle the matter later. The neighbor pauses at the door, then says they will cover the water barrel tonight. That, more than the payment, feels like a good outcome. After they have gone, you lock the door for the final time. The room is quiet again, though not empty, in the same way it was before. The last conversation remains in the chair by the table, in the cup you set out and did not use, in the few items now missing from the shelf. You wash your hands at the basin. Then you begin the last cleaning of the day. The used instruments go into boiled water. Cloth wraps are rinsed, sorted, and hung where they can dry. The examination surface is wiped down. You empty the basin, refill it from the filter, and place a clean towel beside it for morning. On the counter, you arrange tomorrow's first needs. Fresh water in the small glass bottle, clean wraps, the maintenance notebook, the replacement filter cloth, a pencil shaved to a workable point, the ledger reopened to a blank page. The clinic does not sleep exactly. Its filter continues its low work. Its supplies wait behind locked doors. Its lamps hold a little fuel in reserve. But its day is finished, and yours is nearly finished too. You sit at the desk while the last of the boiled water cools in its pot. The chair gives the same small creak it has given all day. Outside, the road has gone dark enough that its ruts no longer show. A few windows glow across the settlement. Farther off, beyond the fields and the low roofs, Diamond City is only a direction now, marked by a faint wash of light against the sky. Your own lamp is turned low. That matters. Lamp fuel is not expensive in the way a rare medicine is expensive, but nothing is cheap when it must come down a road from somewhere else. The flame burns inside a scratched glass chimney, bright enough to show the ledger and little else. It turns the clinic walls amber. It makes the jars on the shelf look fuller than they are. You open the ledger to the page you prepared earlier. The paper is old stock, cut down from larger sheets and bound in rough twine. Some pages came from a trader who found a box of office supplies in a collapsed building. Others were made by hand from fibers, pulp, and patience. The pencil is nearly worn to its metal collar. You use it anyway. The first entries are straightforward. 2 caps for the morning consultation, a strip of clean cloth accepted in place of payment, a promise from the caravan crew, written beside the list of tubing, batteries, and antiseptic they are supposed to bring on their next run. Produce from the house call, enough to cover part of the visit and provide tomorrow's meal. A debt from the neighbor who came after dusk, marked not with a hard number, but with a note. Clean cloth when able. You do not keep the book because you enjoy counting what people owe. You keep it because memory changes under pressure. A person may remember bringing you 3 jars of preserved vegetables when it was 2. You may remember offering a discount that you never actually offered. A caravan master may recall a different agreement after several weeks on the road. None of this always comes from dishonesty. People are tired. They are hungry. They are trying to hold together their own lists of needs. The ledger gives those needs a place to sit still. It also tells you what the clinic can survive. You turn back through the previous pages. There are rows of small exchanges, each one plain by itself. A water worker paid in filter mesh. A farmer brought corn and took home wraps. A guard settled an old debt by fixing the hinge on the storage cabinet. Someone who had no caps at all left a repaired stool outside your door before sunrise. No pre-war hospital accountant would recognize this as proper bookkeeping. There are no printed forms, no standard billing codes, no office clerk sorting payments into neat categories. Yet the book does its work. It shows which supplies leave the shelves too quickly. It reminds you who has been waiting on a promised delivery. It warns you when too many people are paying in food at the same time, because food cannot replace batteries, sealed needles, or the small parts needed to keep the filter running. The old world liked to imagine medicine as something that began in a clean room, inside a company with a bright sign over the entrance. A patient arrived. A receptionist found a file. A doctor ordered what was needed. Somewhere beyond the clinic walls, factories made replacement parts by the thousand. Trucks carried them. Warehouses held more. Here, medicine begins much earlier. It begins with a person who remembers to cover a water barrel. It begins with a trader who does not let a box of glass vials break in the back of a cart. It begins with a settler who grows enough food that a tired worker can take a day away from the fields. It begins with someone who knows how to turn scrap metal into a proper latch, or who can tell when a battery is still worth keeping. Your work is in the examination room, but it is also in every agreement that keeps that room supplied. You make a note beside the caravan account. If they return with the promised tubing, you can repair the hand pump connection before the next dry spell. If they do not, you will need to ask around the settlement for a substitute. That may mean more time at the workbench, more favors called in, more water carried by hand while the repair waits. Then you count the caps. They make a quiet, uneven sound as you stack them in groups on the desk. Most are worn smooth around the ridges. Some bear faint marks from old beverage companies, their colors long gone. A few are bent and must be pressed flat before they will sit in a stack. Caps are useful because people agree they are useful. That is the whole secret. In the Commonwealth, a cap can buy a meal, a tool part, a few rounds for a guard, a stretch of cloth, a little time at a trader's bench. But the price changes with the weather, the road, the harvest, and the last caravan anyone saw. When clean water is scarce, water becomes dear. When a trader arrives with a crate of preserved goods, food is easier to find for a few days. When a settlement's purifier is working well, people can spare a little more for other necessities. The caps in front of you are not wealth in the old sense. They are permission. Permission to ask for a replacement needle. Permission to buy alcohol for cleaning. Permission to pay a tinkerer's fair rate rather than hoping goodwill will cover the work. You place part of the stack in a small metal box beneath the desk. The rest stays out for the morning purchases you expect to make at the passing stalls. After that, you check the medicine cabinet one shelf at a time. The simple things first. Cloth wraps, soap, salt, clean containers, a jar of powdered rehydration mix. These are the supplies that disappear without anyone noticing. Nobody speaks of them with the same excitement they give a sealed pre-war injector. But they are what carry most people through ordinary trouble. Then the medicines. You count the remaining stim packs without touching them more than necessary. They sit in their padded compartment, each one a pre-war auto-injector made for immediate use. Valuable because it can help when time matters and no proper clinic is nearby. They are useful. They are not magic. A stim pack cannot make a poor diet disappear. It cannot turn dirty water clean. It cannot give a worker 3 days of rest when the settlement needs every pair of hands in the field. It cannot rebuild a supply chain, restore a factory, or make a careful follow-up visit happen if the doctor has no road, no fuel, and no safe way to travel. The games people tell around a fire tend to make medicine look quick. A needle, a hiss, a person back on their feet. But anyone who spends enough time in a clinic learns that staying well is slower than getting through a bad afternoon. It is sleep when sleep can be found. It is boiled water. It is a meal with something green in it, something filling beside it, and enough salt to keep a body working under the sun. It is a clean wrap changed before it becomes a problem. It is knowing when fatigue is only fatigue, and when it is the first sign that something in a person's routine has gone wrong. Most of what you do cannot be traded in a single dramatic moment. You listen. You compare today's complaint with last month's. You ask what the water tasted like. You ask whether the person has been eating, whether they have been sleeping, whether the work changed recently. You notice when someone who usually speaks quickly has begun to pause between sentences. You notice when a laborer says they are fine, but leaves one boot unlaced because bending down has become difficult. That kind of knowledge has no sealed package and no price stamped on it. It takes time. It takes repetition. It takes people coming back. You close the medicine cabinet and turn to the smaller notebook beside the ledger. This one is not for debts. It holds reminders for tomorrow. Check the north barrel cover. Ask the water worker about spare mesh. Visit the settlement kitchen before midday. Put aside wraps for the farmer. Test the lantern wick. Speak with the caravan master if the crew returns. Replace the loose screw in the waiting bench. Your handwriting grows smaller as the page fills. Privacy is difficult in a small settlement. Everyone sees who comes through the clinic door. Everyone notices who waits longer than usual. By supper, people may know that a neighbor visited you, though they may not know why. You cannot make the settlement forget what it sees, but you can keep your records shut. You can avoid speaking about one person's concerns while treating another. You can refuse to turn private facts into road gossip. That is part of the work as surely as boiling an instrument or measuring clean water. Trust is not a shelf item either. It is built in small decisions that no one applauds. You draw a line beneath the final entry and sit back. For a moment, the clinic is only its sounds. The filter gives its low, steady murmur from the back room. A pipe ticks as the last warmth leaves it. The cloth wraps hanging near the stove shift slightly in the moving air. Somewhere outside, a cartwheel complains as it turns toward a yard. Then that sound fades too. You are tired, but it is the useful kind of tired. Your hands have done what they could do today. The shelves are not full, though they are not empty. The water is clean enough for morning. The people who came to you have instructions, supplies, or at least a clearer idea of what to watch for. That is not nothing. It takes real skill to keep people well in a place like this. Not the skill of a spotless pre-war clinic with every drawer stocked and every machine serviced on schedule. A different skill? The skill of making a little go far without making it unsafe. The skill of admitting what you do not know, then watching closely enough to learn. The skill of choosing which item to save, which favor to accept, which debt can wait, and which cannot. You have become good at work that the old world made necessary. Before the Great War, companies such as MedTech made medical tools for a country built around shelves, power grids, freight routes, trained staff, and customers who could assume that another shipment would arrive. Vault-Tec sold safety as a product, wrapped it in cheerful brochures and neat promises. Robco built machines that expected electricity to come from the wall whenever they were switched on. Those systems were designed to serve their owners first. Even at their best, they did not treat every person equally. Still, they depended on a world where ordinary care could be supported by something larger than one exhausted individual with a ledger and a lamp. That larger support is gone. In its place are clinics like yours, water workers, farmers, tinkerers, caravan crews, neighbors who cover barrels at night, people preserving fragments of knowledge, because there is no institution left that will do it for them. Your care is real. It matters to the person who can return to work with clean wraps and sensible instructions. It matters to the household that learns to store water better. It matters to the settlement that keeps one more filter running, one more food store protected, one more worker rested before exhaustion becomes something harder to manage. But you did not choose the shortage. You did not build the roads that make every delivery uncertain. You did not decide that medicine should survive as scattered boxes, faded labels, and machines without factories to support them. The systems that made this world were built by people who filed reports, met quotas, and went home at the end of the day. They did not leave room in those records for you. They did not know the shape of this desk, or the pencil worn down in your hand. They did not know the names you do not write, the debts you forgive, the advice you repeat until someone finally follows it. They made the failures you spend each day repairing, then vanished into the past that left those failures behind. You close the ledger. The cover settles with a soft, final sound. Tomorrow will begin with the filter, the lantern, the clean wraps, and whatever the road brings. For now, you place the pencil across the closed book and carry the caps box to its hiding place. At the door, you pause to lower the lamp. The flame narrows. The glass chimney dims. Then the room slips gently into shadow. Only the water filter remains awake, working its steady, patient rhythm through the night.